If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 41, Lance. The next day, Saturday. Caw. Once again, Johan awoke to the sensation of Gastly licking him. He was starting to grow numb to the spicy taste of pecha berries, which he now routinely used to cure his paralysis. Fortunately, Gastly had only just begun mastering toxic and couldn't yet consistently use it. Johan had managed to cure himself after consuming 3 pecha berries yesterday, finally shaking off the poison. After a quick wash, the first thing Johan did was tie on an apron and head to the kitchen to prepare breakfast. Cracking an egg into the pan with one hand, he glanced at his phone playing the morning news. The sizzling of the pan mixed with the anchor's voice, and the smell of breakfast quickly filled the room. Meanwhile, Gastly was lounging on the couch, its tongue rapidly tapping away at the screen. Little notifications like "Thanks for the stars, old ghost of the millennium" popped up on the screen, quickly drowned out by the flood of chat messages in the live feed. Still, Gastly was having the time of its life. It was watching a live Pokémon battle on the Sinnoh channel. The contestants? Cynthia vs Gardenia. But Gastly wasn't focused on the battle itself, it was fixated on the Pokémon Cynthia was commanding. An EV. Hat, EV. Hat. Dinner's ready, Johan suddenly called out. Caw. Startled, Gastly quickly shut off the phone, casting a guilty glance toward the kitchen. It peeked out cautiously, seeing that Johan hadn't noticed, and let out a sigh of relief before quickly closing the live stream. "What were you sneaking around and watching?" Johan asked, seemingly casually, as he sat down and untied his apron. Caw, Gastly shook its head emphatically, trying hard to look innocent. Of course, Johan could see through Gastly's act, but he didn't push any further. At least Gastly's account didn't have any money on it, so there was no danger of getting scammed. He could let it be. "Since it's the weekend, let's head to Rustboro City's police station. Maybe we can calm down 1 or 2 of their Pokémon," Johan said between bites of breakfast, "and then we'll swing by the shops to see if we can get you a move learning machine." Gastly had just learned Toxic, but the issue was that it overlapped too much with Will-O-Wisp and Curse. Although Gastly already knew a decent number of moves, most of them were debuffs, and it had very few offensive options. Johan wanted to see if he could afford a trademark for Hex. Since Gastly had said yesterday it wanted to become stronger and Johan had a dream of becoming a real trainer, there was no reason to hold back. Caw. Gastly's eyes gleamed mischievously, swirling with ideas. "I came up with an awesome move last night." Johan raised an eyebrow as he bit into his egg. Could Gastly really be that talented? Had it already learned another move? Could it have learned 2 moves in just one day? Caw. Gastly flashed a confident grin, its misty form shifting and shaping into a silhouette. Johan's expression turned odd as he watched. He stared at Gastly for a long time before tentatively asking, "Is that a lizard?" Caw. Gastly glared at him. "A bat." Caw. "A tardigrade." Gastly. After much effort and some very elaborate explanations from Gastly, Johan finally realized, "Wait, you're saying that was supposed to be Giratina?" Caw. Gastly nodded enthusiastically. "Imagine how scary it would be if I turned into Giratina the next time I use Spite." "Right?" Johan finished the last of his egg and wiped his lips. "How about you stick with transforming into Gastly next time?" Gastly's attempts at transformation left much to be desired. Caw. /////. Meanwhile, in Kanto's rock tunnel. Charizard, fly lower, a young man with short auburn hair wearing a cape instructed from atop a sturdy Charizard, who was skimming the canyon floor. In his earpiece, a voice crackled, "Lance, the area has been cleared of tourists." "Understood, thank you," Lance replied, holding the earpiece as he scanned the jagged rocks surrounding him, his sharp eyes searching for something. Suddenly, "Roar!" Charizard let out a low growl, flapping its wings to gain altitude. Just then, a cliffside in the tunnel exploded, sending shards of jagged rock flying in every direction, carving a deep hole into the rocky face. Had Charizard's reflexes not been quick enough, the shards might not have harmed the sturdy Pokémon but could have injured Lance. "We've found it," Lance muttered, unfazed. Several days earlier, a vicious, unidentified Pokémon had been reported in Rock Tunnel, attacking Pokémon and people alike. As one of Kanto's League investigators, Lance had taken on the mission to track it down. After several days of searching, and with a bit of deliberate provocation from Charizard, the creature had finally revealed itself. From the dark chasm in the cliff emerged a pale grey, blue-eyed Pokémon with a striking resemblance to a pterosaur and Aerodactyl. Upon seeing its true form, Lance dismounted from Charizard and stared in surprise. "An Aerodactyl," he said, his voice tinged with excitement. He tossed a Pokeball into the air. In a flash of light, a menacing Gyarados materialized beside him. Roar! Facing Gyarados, Aerodactyl was unafraid and let out a loud, fierce cry in response. The two Pokémon locked eyes, both radiating intense energy. Charizard, Dragon Breath. Gyarados, Waterfall. Lance ordered. Aerodactyl hesitated for a moment as the two powerful Pokémon attacked from both sides. Wait, this wasn't supposed to be a one-on-one battle. Thunk. The Pokeball stopped shaking, and the red light on it dimmed. Lance stepped forward to retrieve the ball, looking through the red-tinted glass at the now sleeping Aerodactyl. However, his expression was not one of satisfaction. Throughout the battle, he had sensed that this Aerodactyl had just recently awakened from its fossilized state. Its body was far from healthy, and even its emotional and mental state seemed off. Realizing this, Lance wasted no time in recalling Gyarados and jumping back onto Charizard's back. He quickly flew toward the nearest Pokémon Center. "Sorry, sir." Back in Rustboro City, Johan and a dejected Gastly left the department store, with the sales clerk's apologetic voice echoing behind them. They had the Hex trademark in stock, but Johan couldn't afford it. Even after helping to calm down two rampaging Pokémon at the Rustboro police station earlier in the day, he still didn't have enough money. That was partly because the station only had two rampaging Pokémon left. The rest of the afflicted Pokémon had already been sent to Rustboro on Drake's orders, but it would take some time to transport them. Those Pokémon were difficult to move, and standard Pokeballs couldn't contain them. "It's all right, we'll save up eventually," Johan reassured Gastly. He just needed to complete more side quests and earn some cash. Taking out his phone, Johan scrolled through his contacts and found a familiar name. "Grain in the field, how's Feebas doing lately?" Chapter 42, Hex and the Therapy Call. Ding! Your account. 50,000 Poke Dollars transferred. Available balance, 125,000 Poke Dollars. Caca. Gastly was in shock, staring at Johan's phone, eyes wide. "How did you manage that?" Johan's expression tightened, and after taking a deep breath, he exhaled slowly, casting a resigned glance at the bustling crowd around him. "I sold a bit of something." If there had been a cigarette in his hand at that moment, the picture would have been complete. Caca. Sigma, LLL. Wait a second. Johan quickly raised his hand, but before he could give Gastly a flick, he remembered that Gastly was a gaseous Pokémon. One flick, and he'd be back to chomping on Pecha berries. After calming himself, Johan glared at Gastly. "What kind of nonsense are you thinking about? Wait a minute, why do you even know about that?" Caca. Gastly laughed awkwardly, eyes darting to the side. "Well, there was that time I saw your old phone." "Forget it, we're going to buy the trademark now," Johan cut him off, turning and walking back towards Rustboro's department store, a sour expression on his face. Gastly followed behind, eyes sparkling. "I think I've figured out something interesting." A few minutes later, an emotionally pained Johan and an excited Gastly walked out of the store, holding a brand new trademark disc in hand. The store clerk waved them off with an even wider smile than before. "This is robbery. How is a Hex trademark so expensive?" Johan scrolled through his bank account on his phone. Available balance, 20,000 Poke Dollars. His heart ached even more at the sight of it. Caca. Caca. Gastly nodded in full agreement, looking equally distressed. "Yet, with that much money, I could have bought a mountain of energy cubes and moo milk. More importantly, this type of trademark wasn't like the ones in the games. You didn't just use it, and your Pokémon would immediately learn the move. Gastly would have to sit down, watch the instructional video, and follow along with the training regimen. Still, it wasn't all bad. The trademark included plenty of tips from experienced trainers on how to master the move, improve its effectiveness, and integrate it into real battles. There were even several video demonstrations of Hex being used in actual combat as reference. Well, it's better to get it sooner rather than later. The faster Gastly learns it, the better, Johan reassured himself. At least it would be safer than Gastly randomly learning toxic and testing it out on him like last time. He could end up dead from Gastly's experiments one day if he wasn't careful. Grr. Gastly's stomach growled loudly. It looked up at Johan with pleading eyes. After all, spending the day calming down crazed Pokémon and the afternoon's training had taken its toll. I'm starving. I've practically withered away. Hurry up and make dinner. All right. Let's go home. Johan waved Gastly off and began walking, his frustration fading. After all, earning money was always for Gastly's sake. Today, he had just fulfilled another promise. As night fell, Johan and Gastly made their way through the narrow alleyways, with Gastly floating behind him. Luckily, the streets were empty. Seeing this scene in the dead of night would probably terrify anyone who happened to pass by, especially with Gastly's eyes bloodshot and dark circles beneath them, looking like a ghost who had gone days without food. One sight of Gastly in this state would scare the soul out of anyone. Rustle. Rustle. As they passed the small neighborhood dump, both Johan and Gastly heard a noise. This was an old neighborhood with many alleyways and few main roads, so the garbage collected here could pile up for days before being taken away. Now, the dump was a veritable mountain of trash. Thankfully, it was autumn. In summer, the smell alone would be as unbearable as standing next to a mook. Johan rarely took this path, only when necessary. Today, he was using it to take a shortcut home since Gastly was famished. In the dim moonlight, something in the garbage heap seemed to move. Caw. It's alive! Gastly hissed, lowering its voice. Even so, in the dead of night, the sound echoed clearly in the quiet alley. The wriggling stopped. It's probably just Grimer or Mook attracted by the smell of the garbage. I should file a complaint tomorrow, Johan muttered, quickening his pace. Finally back home, after devouring the dinner Johan prepared enough food for 5 people. Gastly was now lazily sprawled across the sofa, watching the instructional hex video from the newly bought trademark. As the video went on, Gastly's playful demeanor gradually faded, and its expression grew more focused. It nodded occasionally, finally understanding some of the techniques it saw. Meanwhile, Johan, having shed his apron, stepped out onto the balcony alone. He stared at his phone's contact list, his fingers gently running over the phone case. A cool breeze blew through, rustling his black hair as a determined look crossed his face. Some things you just can't avoid. He opened the profile of Evie Eats Cabbage and hit the voice call button. This was what he meant earlier when he mentioned selling something. Of course, the 50,000 poke dollars wasn't some shady deal, it was for the psychological treatment services he had provided previously. This time, the client had asked for an in-person session, but Johan had firmly declined. After some negotiation, they settled on a therapy session via voice call, which was still within Johan's comfort zone. Johan had mentally prepared himself. No matter how gruff or booming the voice was on the other end, he would stay composed. For the sake of professionalism, and money. It didn't take long for the call to connect. Hello. Johan blinked in surprise. It was a woman's voice. Not just any voice, but a smooth, soothing tone, slightly low-pitched yet surprisingly pleasant. There was a hint of fatigue that added a certain softness to it. Ahem. Johan cleared his throat, quickly regaining his composure. Hello, this is Grain in the Field. He couldn't help but exhale in relief. Anyone would prefer a patient who was easy to talk to, right? Could you explain how the consultation fees work? I'm not really sure. The woman's voice trailed off uncertainly. I'm not really sure either. Johan thought, unsure how to respond. He tentatively offered, how about we charge based on time? How much per session? For a moment, both Johan and the woman on the other end, who was none other than Cynthia, had the same blank, clueless look on their faces. I haven't fully assessed Feebas yet, so maybe 1,000 poke dollars. He didn't want to overcharge, especially since she had already paid him a good amount for the previous consultations. After all, even if she was a cash cow, Johan wasn't about to exploit her too much. He had to have a conscience. Wouldn't that be a bit too cheap? Cheap? Before Johan could respond, Cynthia spoke up again, how about 2,000 instead? Well, if you insist. Johan agreed quickly. Your account. 12,000 poke dollars transferred. Available balance, 32,000 poke dollars. Hey? I've sent the payment over. Let's book the first hour, and if we need more time, we can extend it. Johan. So, she meant 2,000 poke dollars per 10 minutes? Yikes. He temporarily set aside his conscience. Alright, then. Tell me what's been happening with Feebas. They finally got down to business. Well, Feebas has been a lot more lively during the day, much more energetic. But lately, at night, she's been having these dreams. Cynthia described Feebas' recent situation. Dreams? What kind of dreams? Feebas hasn't been able to describe them in detail, but it seems like she's always dreaming about a strange Pokémon. A very peculiar one. Dreaming about a strange Pokémon? Johan glanced back at Gastly, who was now deeply engrossed in the Hex video, wearing a very serious expression. After thinking it over, he suggested, here's what we'll do. Move your phone closer to Feebas, and I'll attempt a simple hypnosis therapy. We'll try to relax her mind and determine whether the dreams are caused by internal factors or something external. Alright. After the sound of some shuffling, rustling, and hurried footsteps, Johan heard the faint rustle of leaves and the gentle trickling of water through the phone. Okay, I'm ready. Alright, get Feebas to follow my instructions. Or, better yet, since she trusts you more, you can guide her through the process. Start by taking deep breaths. Slow down your breathing, in and out, gradually. Johan's voice became softer, his tone slower, as he painted a calming mental image for Fe. Iba. About 20 minutes later. Has Feebas fallen asleep yet? Hello, are you still there? Hello. Did she fall asleep? Hello. The only sound left on the call was steady breathing. Should I hang up? 2,000 for 10 minutes. After half an hour passed. Yawning, Johan finally climbed into bed. He gently tucked the now fast asleep Gastly, who was drooling all over the sheets, under a blanket. Good night, he whispered, turning off the lights and ending the call. Chapter 43, The Beginning of a Legend. Sunday morning. Johan woke up naturally, something that took him by surprise but left him feeling relieved. Gastly, the little troublemaker, must have known he had a tough day yesterday, so it graciously let him sleep in for a change. Caw. However, just as he was starting to enjoy the peace, a ghostly face suddenly dropped down from the ceiling, tongue out, and before Johan could react, it gave him a big, sloppy lick across the face. Too careless. Wiping off the drool, Johan skillfully pulled out a cherry berry from his bag and popped it into his mouth, the familiar spiciness burning his taste buds. You know, Johan grumbled, with the amount of cherry berries I eat every morning thanks to you, I'm sure when I'm old, my stomach will be ruined and it'll be all your fault. Gastly laughed mischievously. Caw, don't worry, when you're old, I'll still be around. I'll feed them to you. Johan shook his head with a smile. After getting up, he quickly washed up and began making breakfast. Gastly, meanwhile, was glued to the trademark learning machine, continuing its training even through breakfast. As it ate, its gaseous body expanded and contracted rhythmically, fully engrossed in the learning process. Johan glanced at Gastly's Pokédex entry to check its progress. Gastly. Type, Ghost/Poison. Ability, Levitate. Held item, Toxic Orb. Moves, Confuse Ray, Lick, Hypnosis, Mean Look, Spite, Scary Face, Curse, Will-O-Wisp, Haze, Toxic, Hex. Mood, Happy, Focused, I'm studying hard. Condition, Excellent, full of energy, but it'd be even better with a whiff of gas. Friendship level, 100, you are its best companion. It's even willing to hug a mook for you. This little guy. Johan noticed that while Gastly had already learned both Toxic and Hex, the move names were grayed out, indicating that Gastly had yet to fully master them. On the other hand, Hypnosis and Will-O-Wisp were bright and vivid, showing they were well practiced. But what left Johan speechless was that the brightest move of all was Lick. However, this also helped Johan realize another useful feature of his special ability, it let him gauge how well Gastly had mastered its moves. Gastly turned its gaze toward Johan. Finished eating? If so, we've got a task for today. Johan prepared to change his clothes. Caw. Toxic is manageable, but for Hex, you'll need actual targets to get better at it. Upon hearing this, Gastly's eyes welled up with waves of emotion as it gazed at Johan, tears of joy streaming down its face. Kaka. You're finally going to let me have fun? Johan's expression darkened. If you want to change trainers, just say so. They spent the early part of the day at the university, where Johan had Gastly perform some basic training. By the time the evening rolled around, Johan had rented a cab and brought Gastly to a restaurant called Blastoise's Tail. It was a popular chain, started by a famous chef named Jimmy, a skilled water-type trainer from Kalos who was on track to become the water-type Elite Four member in the future. As soon as they entered, Johan and Gastly were greeted by the unmistakable atmosphere of water types. Statues, murals, and plus-highs of Squirtle, Blastoise, Swampert, and Dugong decorated the place, giving it an oceanic theme. It wasn't overly fancy, but it was refined. Kaka. Gastly floated closer to Johan and whispered nervously. Did you win the lottery? Are we really eating here? Johan smiled without explaining and chose a seat in a quiet corner. A waiter wearing a Squirtle-themed uniform soon came over with menus, enthusiastically pointing out, Sir, today's chef special is Slowpoke Tail Sauté. Kaka. Gastly, who had been flipping through the menu with its mouth watering, nearly choked. Wait, you're serving Pokemon. This is way too intense. Stop drooling. You'll corrode the floor, Johan reminded. Slurp. Terrified, Gastly quickly retracted its tongue. It couldn't afford to pay for the damage. Gastly immediately tried to claim that those were tears of joy, not drool. Johan, meanwhile, calmly looked through the menu. For Gastly's sake, he explained, the head chef here goes by the nickname Slowpoke, that's all. Gastly paused in confusion for a while before muttering a single word. Cool. In this world, some people did eat Pokemon Farfetch'd, for example, came with its own garnish, and it was hunted to near extinction. Now, it was a protected species by law. As for Slowpoke tails, since they could regenerate, many people still coveted them, and there were frequent reports of Slowpoke tail theft. Johan was personally against the idea of eating Pokemon, though he was relieved that it remained a rare and extreme behavior in society. Most of the dishes served in restaurants were just for show. For instance, they served dishes like Farfetch'd wraps, Toro's steaks, and Mary Obscures, but these names were more for show than anything else. Johan decided to wait a bit before ordering. Kaka. Gastly, meanwhile, was ready to devour an entire Toro's. Remember, we're here for a task. A task? Here? This place doubles as a battle restaurant, Johan explained. In this world, battle restaurants were quite common. They attracted customers by offering Pokemon battles as entertainment, with a special bonus, winners could enjoy their meals for free, up to a certain limit. Johan had researched the place beforehand, and today's matchups were perfect for Gastly. Upon hearing this, Gastly's expression lit up. Kaka. I see. Gastly had thought Johan would take it to one of those battle clubs instead. But then Gastly's eyes narrowed suspiciously, sizing Johan up. Today, Johan was dressed in casual clothes, wearing a cap and mask. Kaka. So, what's with the disguise today? Johan remained unfazed. I'm a university professor, remember? What if a student sees me? It wouldn't be a good look. Kaka. Gastly's suspicion only grew. Are you sure that's the reason? As the restaurant began filling up with customers, the battle portion of the evening started. Johan, using the alias Fivefold, registered for a battle with Gastly after a quick scan. And next up, we have Fivefold vs Yuzuki. The announcer called as the two trainers stepped into the arena. Johan's opponent was a teenage boy, no older than 15 or 16, and he was using a Plusle. As the two trainers squared off, the customers started to cheer, and Yuzuki and his Plusle both looked eager to fight. Gastly, too, was full of excitement, while Johan remained calm and composed. Begin. The announcer's voice signaled the start. Yuzuki took the initiative. Plusle, quick attack. Before Johan could even speak, Gastly cackled and sank into the floor with a poof, leaving the golden sparks dancing on Plusle's cheeks to fizzle out. Where'd it go? Yuzuki and Plusle both seemed confused. Gastly, scary face. Kaka. Suddenly, Gastly appeared behind Plusle, a massive ghostly face looming over it. The poor Plusle's fur bristled in terror, and it immediately flinched. Gastly, hex. Kaka. Gastly's dark aura flared, its eyes glowing ominously as it prepared the attack. But midway through, Gastly faltered, like a balloon that had suddenly lost air. The attack failed. Meanwhile, Yuzuk snapped his plusle back into action. No rush, Johan said gently. Start with Confuse Ray, then follow up with Hex. This time, the move succeeded. Though the battle didn't go as smoothly as Johan had hoped, it wasn't particularly difficult. Afterward, Johan and Gastly continued to face off against a few other challengers, a man in his 40s with a gulpin, a woman in her 30s with a mask rain, and so on. Gradually, however, the once noisy restaurant grew quieter and quieter until it was eerily silent. About half an hour later, a sweating waiter nervously approached Johan, practically trembling as he asked him to step aside. Mr. Fivefold, the restaurant has decided to make an exception and offer you a free meal today. We were wondering, maybe you and your Gastly could take a little break. Gastly peeked out from behind Johan, its little ghostly eyes looking somewhat forlorn. Now I know why Johan dressed up so much. All right, Johan agreed. Quickly, not wanting to get thrown out. Can you pack the meal to go for me? The waiter heaved a huge sigh of relief. Thank you, thank you. We'll even throw in 2 free desserts. Once Johan and Gastly left, the restaurant finally began to return to its usual bustling atmosphere. Who was that guy? He's really something. Something? His tactics were downright dirty. But man, he was strong. I think the announcer said his name was Fivefold. And so, the trainer known as Fivefold and his Gastly became something of a nightmare for battle restaurants around Kanalave City, whispered about as if they were a legend. But that's a story for another time. Back at home, Johan couldn't help but chuckle at Gastly's still wounded expression. All right, all right. I'll give you my dessert too. Consider it a reward, okay? Gastly brightened up immediately, grinning ear to ear. Caw. In fact, it even asked, so where are we going tomorrow? Johan sighed. He definitely didn't want to get banned from every restaurant in town. What if they finally sent someone powerful his way? Before he could respond, his phone suddenly buzzed. A message popped up. Who am I? I've got it. I can be Gastly, or I can be Mewtwo. I'm me, but I can be anything. Hey? Chapter 44, Mewtwo's Tears. Mewtwo, who hadn't been online for a long time, suddenly came back online. And not only that, it kicked things off with a deep existential statement. It felt like one of those moments where someone says, Master, I have achieved enlightenment, leaving Johan momentarily speechless, unsure of how to respond. Before Johan could think of a reply, Mewtwo sent another message. Who am I, but I still don't know what my purpose is. Why was I born? And what am I supposed to live for? Well, this was both expected and unsurprising. It was essentially a question about the superego. The superego operates under moral principles, with 3 key functions. It inhibits the impulses of the ID, monitors the actions of the ego, and strives for perfection. But in order to understand the superego, Mewtwo first needed to grasp the ID, which represents its most primitive, instinctual desires, those subconscious behaviors that exist beyond intellect. The superego and ID are opposing forces. Without the ID, the superego wouldn't exist. Johan rubbed his temples. In Mewtwo Strikes Back, Giovanni once gave Mewtwo a similar answer. At that time, Giovanni responded by saying, Pokémon exist to be used by humans, to serve human purposes. This was essentially an attempt to impose the ID onto Mewtwo, suppressing its superego. Naturally, this led to Mewtwo's furious outburst. However, Johan had already anticipated this moment and had some thoughts prepared. After carefully choosing his words, he began typing. Grain in the field. Before you can figure that out, you need to answer a more immediate question. Where are you? Who am I? Where am I? Grain in the field. The world is vast. There's the universe, planets, continents, cities, houses on a large scale and a small one. If I'm in bed, I'm there to sleep. If I'm at the dinner table, I'm there to eat. If I'm at work, it's to earn money. Where may seem like a vague question, but it's a crucial reference point to understand your inner self. The ID is tied to instincts, which are in some ways shaped by one's environment. Take wild animals, for example. Their instincts include fighting, hunting, and mating. But to fight, hunt, or mate, there needs to be another animal or a territory involved, right? Once you add moral codes or rules to that environment, that leads to the superego. There was a brief period of silence. Johan used this time to wash up, waiting for Mewtwo to process everything and reply. Who am I? I remember. I was in a container. I saw AI 2, Charmander 2, Squirtle 2, Bulbasaur 2. I kind of miss them. Who am I? I feel something in my eyes. AI 2 once told me about something called tears. I can't stop them. What should I do? Reading the words on his phone, Johan fell into a brief silence. He knew about AI, and he also knew about AI 2. AI was the deceased daughter of Dr. Fuji. AI 2 was a virtual being, created as a replication of AI's consciousness in the form of electrical waves, as Dr. Fuji couldn't bear the reality of his daughter's death. Dr. Fuji was one of the scientists involved in the creation of Mewtwo. AI 2 was also the first being to make contact with young Mewtwo, teaching it about the sun, the wind, the moon, and the stars, providing it with the first real comfort in its lonely existence. So, AI 2 held a very special place in Mewtwo's heart. Who am I? I want to see her. I want to see AI 2 again. Bzzzt. Suddenly, Johan felt a small electric shock run through his hand. His brow twitched as he quickly placed his phone on the table. Yikes! The Hone region and the Kanto region are so far apart. Caca. Noticing Johan's strange reaction, Gastly, with white frosting smeared all over its mouth, raised its head and squinted at him. You want some? It asked this while sneakily wrapping its foggy body around the small cake with its gaseous form. Johan, still preoccupied with Mewtwo, ignored Gastly for the moment. After confirming that his phone was working fine, he picked it back up. In reality, this was a good sign for Mewtwo. At least now it knew what it wanted. Guiding Mewtwo is so difficult. Johan thought, feeling a bit helpless. One wrong move, and it might not lead to the end of the world, but it would certainly lead to massive destruction. That much was almost guaranteed. He shuddered at the thought of what might happen if he was standing in front of Mewtwo in person and it suddenly lost control. For now, he couldn't even risk guiding Mewtwo toward complete freedom. One reason was that doing so would definitely put him at odds with Team Rocket. But more importantly, once Mewtwo was free, Johan might lose all contact with it. If Mewtwo showed up unrestrained at something like the trainer conference, the destruction it could cause would be catastrophic. Grain in the field, for now, I suggest you try to contain those feelings. You must learn to control your instincts. As soon as Johan sent that message, Mewtwo's name on his contact list dimmed once again. Well, there goes the connection. Probably fried the network again. Let's hope nothing major happens. But even if Mewtwo causes trouble, it'll probably be limited to inside Team Rocket's facilities, right? Johan wasn't overly concerned. After all, there were very few things in the world capable of harming Mewtwo. Turning back, he saw Gastly, who had already devoured dinner, dessert, and was now making quick work of some energy cubes. Sometimes, Johan wondered if he was raising a Snorlax instead of a Gastly. Still, Gastly had worked hard during the day's training, and Johan had multiple ways to earn money now, so he didn't scold it. Gastly. Caca. Want to watch a movie? Caca. In Kanto. In Viridian City, inside Team Rocket's underground base. Boom. Boom. Amidst flashing red lights, machines burst into flames. Dozens of scientists and Team Rocket grunts scrambled to control the situation, commanding their Pokémon to extinguish the fires. In the center of the lab, Mewtwo stood calmly in its armor, staring ahead at a raised platform. On the platform stood two figures, both seemingly unbothered by the chaos around them. Boss, this is the second time now. Every time Mewtwo connects to the network, this happens. But thanks to the precautions we took earlier, at least we managed to preserve some of the database information this time, reported Domino. Giovanni, however, seemed to ignore her, silently watching the motionless Mewtwo below. The two gazes met in the air. Suddenly, Giovanni chuckled softly, his deep voice echoing through the lab. So, you want to leave, Mewtwo? Buzz. Under the mirrored visor of Mewtwo's helmet, its glowing blue eyes slowly appeared. For an instant, it was as if time had frozen. The flames, the crackling electricity, the frantic voices, and the Pokémon working to put out the fires all came to a sudden halt. Even Domino, standing beside Giovanni, was frozen mid-motion. Only Giovanni remained unaffected. This is your idea of self-control? Turning everything into a disaster. Giovanni showed no fear in the face of Mewtwo's immense power. Leaning on the railing, he leaned forward slightly. If you want to destroy everything, every person, every Pokémon, everything around you, go ahead. I won't stop you. For the first time, Mewtwo looked around at its surroundings. Did I cause all of this? Destroy everything? Destroy people? Buzz. A terrifying wave of psychic energy rippled out from Mewtwo, and in an instant, all the fires were extinguished. Yet, after doing this, the glowing eyes behind Mewtwo's visor dimmed once more. It remained standing there, motionless. Everything around it began to move again, as if time had resumed its flow. If Johan had been present, he would have been relieved to see this. Although his final message hadn't gone through, Mewtwo had, in fact, learned to restrain itself to suppress its ID. Under its helmet, Mewtwo slowly closed its eyes. I want to see her, and him. Giovanni took one last deep look at the now silent Mewtwo before turning to leave. Domino quickly followed after snapping out of her daze. Boss. Domino, we managed to preserve some of the database this time, right? Yes, we did. Then find him. Him? Domino hesitated for a moment before nodding. Understood. Giovanni's smile grew slightly wider, but his eyes narrowed with amusement as he muttered to himself. A person who can teach Mewtwo to control itself. I must say, I'm rather intrigued by him. Chapter 45, A Visit. Location, Kanto Region. Viridian City, an old training ground. Charizard, Flamethrower. A massive column of flames erupted, with terrifyingly intense fire that seemed blinding even in daylight. Roar. However, within the blaze, a greyish-white Aerodactyl flapped its wings, tearing through the flames, paying no mind to the burning heat as it charged straight at the Charizard. In response, the Charizard showed no fear, standing its ground and planting its feet in preparation to brace for the impact. Boom! The two powerful Pokémon collided with great force, creating shockwaves that stirred up clouds of dust. And then, the two began to clash head-on, trading blows relentlessly. That's enough. At this moment, a voice rang out from the sidelines. It was Lance, the young officer from Kanto. But his command seemed to have little effect, or perhaps, it was more accurate to say that it didn't reach Aerodactyl at all. Aerodactyl's eyes were bloodshot, veins bulging with rage. Consumed by the fight, it seemed not to hear Lance's voice. Charizard, hearing the command, was left with no choice but to keep defending itself. Lance furrowed his brows, watching the scene for a while before sighing in resignation. Return, Aerodactyl. He pulled out a Pokeball and recalled Aerodactyl, giving Charizard a moment to finally relax. Roar. Charizard approached Lance, who patted its arm, signaling that everything was fine. Lance had captured Aerodactyl some time ago, and it had acknowledged him as its trainer. However, its emotions remained unstable. In everyday situations, things were manageable, but whenever a battle grew intense, Aerodactyl would gradually lose control and refuse to listen to commands. Lance had tried numerous methods to help Aerodactyl regain control, but with little success. Looking at the Pokeball in his hand, Lance saw the subdued Aerodactyl inside, its head hung low in regret as if realizing its mistake. It's all right, Aerodactyl. We'll overcome this together. However, before that could happen, Lance needed to understand why Aerodactyl behaved this way. After much consideration, Lance decided to seek help. Fortunately, he had many friends he could turn to for support, like Professor Oak, the Draconid people, even Elite Four members and top-ranking officers. When he shared Aerodactyl's situation online, he quickly received a few responses. But what really caught Lance's eye was a message from Drake, the Dragon-type Elite Four member from the Hone region. Sailor King, losing control? Becoming enraged? I might know someone who can help you. Lance, being a fellow Dragon-type trainer and an investigator like Drake, was familiar with Drake's experiences and held him in high regard. So he reached out to Drake directly. When the call connected, Lance briefly explained Aerodactyl's situation once more. After listening, Drake responded. You should go to Rustboro City in Hone and find a trainer named Johan, or rather, a Pokémon psychologist. He should be able to help you. Just mention that Drake sent you. Johan? A trainer? Lance's eyes lit up again. All right, thank you, Drake, Lance said gratefully. Oh, and one more thing. Drake's voice came through the line once more, sounding slightly louder than usual due to the noisy background, likely because he was dealing with some other matters. When you ask for his help, don't go empty-handed. Remember to bring a gift. Also, his Pokémon is a Gastly, so you might want to approach from that angle. Anyway, I've got to get back to this. A Gastly, hey? That complicated things a bit. Lance's knowledge of ghost and poison-type Pokémon was limited to what he had learned as a combatant. He scratched his head, muttering to himself, can't I just give him money? Then again, that might be too tacky. Suddenly, an idea came to him. Got it. With a swift movement, he leaped onto Charizard's back. Charizard, to MT Silver. Whoosh! With a gust of wind, the orange silhouette soared into the sky. Hone region. These days, Johan and Gastly lived a structured routine. Except for weekends, Johan spent his mornings at the academy. If he had a class, he prepared the lesson plan in advance. However, most of the time, he stayed in his counseling office for an hour. If no one showed up for consultations, he took Gastly to the academy's training room for basic drills. During the afternoons, after a quick nap, they returned to the training room to practice specific moves. After work, they made a stop at Rustboro Police Station to soothe and heal the enraged Pokémon there, helping to refine Gastly's hypnosis technique. If Gastly still had energy left, they sometimes visited one of Rustboro's battle restaurants, provided the event matched Gastly's skill level. Back home in the evenings, Gastly would watch some TV shows, while Johan used the time to answer queries at his online Pokémon psychology consultation room. Lately, the buzz around Johan's research paper had died down, but his online consultation room was busier than ever. Occasionally, Johan even spent 1 or 2 hours helping soothe Feebas, Cynthia, to sleep. That was the easiest money he made from all his jobs so far. Overall, their days were fulfilling and peaceful. Today, at Rustboro Police Station. Thank you for all your hard work, Mr. Johan, Officer Jenny said with a smile as Johan prepared to leave. Caw. Floating behind Johan, Gastly chimed in. Yes, thank you as well, Gastly, Officer Jenny added, making Gastly grin. Caw. With prideful glee, Gastly struck a pose. Tomorrow is the weekend, Johan smiled. If there's no special circumstance, we might not come by. But of course, if there's an emergency, feel free to call me. Officer Jenny nodded in understanding. She saw how hard Johan and Gastly worked, so she wouldn't bother them unless absolutely necessary. As they left the station, the golden light of the setting sun illuminated their path. Gastly, Johan called softly. Caw. 2 eyes peeked out from Johan's collar, blinking curiously. When do you think you'll evolve? Caw. Gastly appeared completely puzzled by the question. Evolve? No idea. Never mind. It's all the same anyway. Once we save up enough money, let's get that substitute move learning machine. With Toxic, along with Substitute and Protect, they would have the foundation for a solid Toxic stall strategy. Passing the basic trainer exam would be much easier after that. Screech. Suddenly, a rather luxurious car pulled up beside Johan and Gastly as they walked. As they looked on in confusion, the car door opened to reveal a smiling Steven. Mr. Johan. Once inside, Gastly floated around the car, inspecting everything curiously. What's this about? Johan asked directly. Well, it might seem a bit forward, but my father would like to invite you to our home, Steven explained. Your home? Johan was taken aback. Joseph Stone? The president of Devon Corporation? Now? Yes, he mentioned wanting to discuss some matters with you. Discuss? Johan's eyes narrowed subtly. Very well. He was curious to learn more about Greater Movely Holdings anyway. The car drove smoothly forward. Steven observed Gastly's increasingly tangible form and couldn't help but feel impressed. Although he saw Gastly almost every day, he still noticed the progress it was making. With Gastly's current strength, combined with Mr. Johan's tactical acumen and, strategies, not even intermediate trainers' Pokémon could stand a chance. Even advanced trainers might struggle against them. Suddenly, Steven seemed to remember something. Oh, by the way, Mr. Johan, have you heard of a trainer named Fivefold? Apparently, his Pokémon is also a Gastly, and it's been dominating most of Rustboro's battle restaurants lately. Caw. Gastly froze mid-movement, slowly turning its head. Johan remained unfazed, his voice steady. No, I haven't heard of him. Caw. Gastly eagerly nodded in agreement. Nope, never heard of Fivefold, totally unfamiliar. Is that so? Steven didn't doubt them, sighing wistfully. I heard that Gastly is quite formidable. I'd love to battle it someday. Chapter 46, Are we being told to get lost? The luxurious extended car soon arrived at an estate not far from the northern part of Rustboro City. The estate's design was quite old-fashioned, but the landscaping was exceptionally well maintained. Even in autumn, lush greenery could be seen everywhere, and the flowers in the gardens were blooming vibrantly. In the grass and among the trees, numerous Pokémon could be seen. Beneath the fountain, some oddish were happily enjoying the water, their leaves looking fresh and verdant. A sunflora leaned against a tree, swaying gently as if on the verge of sleep. Among the flowers, Beautifly and Dustix fluttered gracefully. The smiles on these Pokémon's faces clearly showed they were living happily here. At this moment, a man dressed in a purple suit, sleeves rolled up, and a white towel wrapped around his head was squatting on the ground tinkering with something, drawing the attention of Johan, Steven, and Gastly as they got out of the car. Father! Steven immediately recognized the man and walked forward, asking, What are you tinkering with now? Hearing this, Joseph looked up with a smile. Ah, Steven! Joseph's warm face was smudged with dust, which he didn't seem to notice. In front of him was an odd-looking machine. Beside him floated a cast form. Father, Johan is here, Steven reminded him. Only then did Joseph notice Johan and Gastly standing behind Steven. He was slightly taken aback, then quickly stood up. Oh, right. I almost. Before he could finish speaking, the machine in front of him suddenly exploded with a loud boom, flames bursting from within. Caw. The sound startled Gastly. It wasn't just Gastly cast form, who was even closer to the machine, teared up. Wah! Its body swiftly transformed from its usual grey color to a blue raindrop shape, and rain began pouring down, accompanied by sizzling sounds as the flames on the machine were extinguished. Both Steven and Johan let out a sigh of relief. Sorry about that, Johan, Joseph began to apologize. But then... Zap! Golden lightning suddenly sparked from cast form, and a bolt of electricity struck Joseph directly. Thunderbolt? For a moment, all three of them froze, especially Joseph, whose body still crackled with static. His mouth was slightly open, and a little smoke escaped from it. Is this some real-life version of Ash's mishaps? Joseph's IQ seemed to be off the charts in its own way. Cough, Joseph coughed out another puff of black smoke but didn't seem angry. He simply smiled again, gently reassuring cast form, It's all right, it's all right. I'm sorry I scared you. Woo. Cast form gradually calmed down under Joseph's comforting words, transforming back to its original grey, balloon-like form. Caw. Gastly's gaze shifted between Joseph and Johan. Did I hold back too much before? Looks like he won't die at all. Steven, can you check with the kitchen on the progress of dinner? Joseph asked once cast form had settled down. Steven glanced at Johan, knowing his father wanted to have a private conversation. Seeing Johan had no objections, he nodded and headed towards the mansion. Mr. Johan, forgive my clumsiness, Joseph said, taking off the white towel on his head and wringing out the water from cast form's rain. He casually wiped his face, which became much cleaner instantly. Johan chuckled and shook his head. There was nothing to laugh at. After all, he had a Gastly that could paralyze or poison him at any moment. What Johan saw was a scene of harmonious coexistence between humans and Pokémon. Shall we take a walk? Joseph suggested. Sure. The two strolled through the estate's expansive garden. Gastly's eyes darted around. It decided to approach cast form. I need to get some pointers. How do you control your power without killing anyone? Woo. However, cast form seemed somewhat afraid of Gastly. The friendlier Gastly tried to look, the further away cast form drifted. For a moment, the two Pokémon were chasing each other through the garden. Meanwhile, Joseph and Johan walked alongside a small stream and began their conversation. I think. Steven was about 6 years old at the time. I took him out for some field research and gave him a beldum and a freshly dug rare stone. Ever since then, he's been completely enamored with Pokémon and stones. Thinking back on it now, he was so innocent and happy back then. As Joseph spoke, a smile appeared on his face, a father's smile. Johan had heard much of this from Stephen back in Lavaridge town. But he remained silent, serving as a quiet listener. Actually, Mr. Johan, I invited you here today partly to properly thank you for everything you've done. The incident in the alleyway and what happened in Lavaridge town, it's all thanks to you. I also heard that Stephen gets along well with you at the academy and often listens to your advice. Before Johan could reply, Joseph continued. Another reason I invited you is to formally ask if you would consider becoming Stephen's private tutor. A private tutor? Johan was momentarily stunned. He had considered various possibilities for why Joseph wanted to talk, but this was not one of them. Indeed, Joseph carefully straightened a flower that had been growing askew. Or, you could be an advisor for Devon Corporation. I understand you are quite busy, but I believe it wouldn't take too much of your time. Johan stopped walking as well. And what exactly do you want me to teach Stephen? How to be an ideal heir to Devon? Joseph shook his head, smiling. Quite the opposite. I want you to teach him how to enjoy life's joys, to live happily as a trainer and as a lover of stones. Johan couldn't help but smile. It's funny. Stephen's love for Pokémon and stones led him to dream of inheriting Devon Corporation sooner so his father, Joseph, could retire and enjoy life. And Joseph was willing to set aside the massive business empire he had built from the ground up, just so his son could find happiness doing what he loves. Dinner. The table was full of food, but Gastly hovered with its head hanging low. It cautiously glanced at Johan's stern expression and quickly looked away. It looked like a child who had made a mistake and was feeling very guilty. Seeing Gastly like this, Johan sighed in exasperation. Caw 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 caw. I just wanted to say hi to Castform, be friends. Besides, isn't Castform a normal type Pokémon that's immune to ghost type moves? Johan's face darkened. Is that really the problem? Who wouldn't get scared if they turned around and saw a creepy ghost face with a big tongue? It's all right, Mr. Johan, Stephen said as he entered the room, smiling at Johan and Gastly. Caw caw. Seeing Stephen, Gastly seemed to find a savior. What about your father and Castform? Johan asked, relieved. After all, scaring someone's Pokémon to the point of fainting while being a guest was awkward, to say the least. Oh, they went to the hospital, Stephen said casually. Johan. Oh, right, my father wanted me to give you this as a thank you gift. Stephen took out a cube-shaped box, which contained a Pokémon egg. Caw caw. Gastly murmured cautiously. Giving an egg. Are we being told to get lost? Chapter 47, Are you really a genius? The night sky was exceptionally bright with stars. Hiccup. Gastly floated behind Johan, wobbling contentedly yet looking quite uncomfortable. Caw caw. I told you not to eat so much, Johan sighed. Caw caw. Hey. We're almost home, don't throw up on me. Half an hour later, Gastly lay lazily on the sofa, scrolling through videos on its phone. Johan, having just dried his damp hair with a towel, walked out of the bathroom and sat by the dining table, gazing at the Pokémon egg in the incubator with a look of resignation. Taking care of a Gastly was hard enough, and now Joseph had given him a Pokémon egg as a gift. And the main issue? He didn't even know what kind of Pokémon was inside this egg. During dinner, Joseph had called to reassure Johan that Castform was fine and that he didn't need to worry. He also apologized for not being able to join him for dinner. But when Johan asked what kind of egg it was, Joseph had only responded with a mysterious smile. Johan had reason to suspect that maybe Joseph didn't even know what was in the egg. Well, just leave it there for now. The incubator will keep it safe, I just need to add nutrients every few days. Surely the egg Joseph gave him wouldn't hatch into something as common as a Magikarp, right? Johan placed the incubator on a shelf. When he turned around, he saw Gastly watching him and immediately spoke sternly. Don't even think about messing with it. Caw caw. Gastly jumped up, looking aggrieved. What do you take me for? I wouldn't eat it. Maybe just lick it a little. No licking. Johan retorted, scowling. Caw caw. Gastly tilted its head, confused. How else do you make friends? Gastly was already eager to befriend whatever Pokémon would hatch from that egg. Johan took a deep breath and pulled a technical machine out of his pocket. If you promise not to lick it for a whole month, this is yours. Gastly's eyes lit up instantly. Caca. Where did you get that? I sold myself for it, Johan muttered grumpily as he dried his hair and changed into fresh clothes. Caca. Gastly looked puzzled. Sold yourself again? This was the substitute technical machine Johan got with the salary from his new position as a Devon Corporation advisor after accepting Joseph's offer. After changing, Johan came back with a mop, brush, and a bucket from the bathroom. Gastly gave him a puzzled look. What are you doing now? Cleaning up your masterpiece. Got to be considerate, or we might attract a grimer, and then we'd get complaints, Johan replied. Gastly chuckled awkwardly. Oops. Swish, swish. The soft moonlight enveloped Rustboro City in a delicate veil. Water stains on the ground reflected faint glimpses of the moon, constantly changing shapes as Johan scrubbed them away. Gastly drifted around, left and right, with its shadow casting ghostly forms on the ground and walls under the moonlight. Caw caw caw. Go, go, keep it up. Gastly cheered while still glued to the technical machine video. Phew. Johan exhaled, wiping the sweat from his brow. Seeing the now spotless floor, he nodded in satisfaction. Almost done. With that, he picked up the bucket. Splash. Fresh water washed over the ground, making it clean again. Caw caw. Gastly called out to get Johan's attention. Johan turned and saw that Gastly's misty aura was shifting and swelling, and its expression was growing focused and serious, with its face slightly reddened. With a low murmur from Gastly, a portion of the dark mist behind it split off, forming a smaller, shadowy figure in Gastly's shape with a wicked grin. Two shadows were now cast on the ground. Substitute? Johan was stunned as he watched. Caw. Gastly looked proudly at Johan. It guided the substitute back into its shadow, making it appear and disappear at will. Did you just learn it? Johan glanced at Gastly's data on his Pokémon app, seeing the word substitute now listed in the mastered moves section. It couldn't have been watching the video for more than an hour. Maybe not even that long. Sure, substitute wasn't an especially difficult move, it was relatively simple in the grand scheme of things. But other Pokémon would still need at least a day or two to fully grasp it. How did you manage it in less than an hour? Are you really a genius? Johan asked. Or perhaps you've got some kind of straight-A student system installed. Caw, Gastly cackled proudly. I told you I was talented. Now you believe me, hey? In truth, Gastly did seem to have a knack for learning moves quickly, like Haze, Toxic, and Hex. And it also got better at moves it had already learned quite fast. Poof. Watching as the substitute dissolved and returned to Gastly, Johan began to understand. It wasn't just talent, Gastly's frequent practice of morphing into different forms had given it excellent control over its own body. Caw. Gastly was now pumped to learn its next move. No, this isn't enough, Johan said seriously. Confidence was good, but too much could lead to arrogance, and he didn't want Gastly getting carried away. Caw. Think about it. Since substitute is part of your body, why can't it use moves? Johan suggested. Hey. Gastly blinked, glancing at the technical machine. It didn't say that in the video. Hypnosis only says it puts foes to sleep, but is that all your hypnosis does? Johan asked. Gastly's eyes widened in realization. That's true. So, just because other Pokémon can't use moves with their substitutes, doesn't mean you can't. You're talented, aren't you? Johan said with a glint of mischief in his eyes. Imagine if your substitute could use moves like Will-O-Wisp while you hit with Hex. Wouldn't that take down opponents in one shot? Or, your substitute uses Confuse Ray, and you follow up with Lick. A double whammy. Think bigger, make 3 or 4 substitutes all using different moves. The opponent wouldn't stand a chance. Gastly's eyes gleamed with excitement. It was like a door to a new world had just opened. That makes so much sense. Caw. Gastly excitedly lunged at Johan. Splat! Its tongue landed squarely on Johan's face. Crunch! Johan wiped his face as he took a bite of a cherry berry, mumbling, right? You've got a lot left to learn. Caw. Gastly nodded earnestly. Let's head back. As Johan was picking up the bucket, he suddenly had a thought and walked over to a nearby trash station. He pulled out a handful of poke blocks from his pocket and set them on the ground. Caw. I read in the news that urban areas have gotten too clean, and Grimer are losing their habitats. The League had to set up dedicated trash stations for them. They've got it rough too. If we can help, we should, even if it's just a little, Johan explained. After leaving the poke blocks, Johan and Gastly headed home. Not long after they left, movement stirred in the previously silent trash station. A pair of eyes appeared from the shadows. The next day, while waiting for breakfast, Gastly, practicing substitute by the window, suddenly noticed an orange figure circling in the sky. Caw. Look, a plane. Chapter 48, Hey, it's a dodo. Upon closer inspection, Gastly's so-called airplane was actually a majestic Charizard. And on Charizard's back, there seemed to be someone lying down. Hey! Johan leaned out the window, his head tilting slightly. That familiar pose, that slightly visible cloak, it was unmistakably Lance. Why was Lance here? No, maybe he wasn't here for me. After all, old neighborhoods like this, without much surveillance, were the best places to hide criminals. With that thought, Johan pulled back from the window, humming a little tune as he continued making breakfast. Half an hour later. Knock, knock, knock. Someone rapped on the door. Caw, Gastly mumbled with its mouth full of bread. It quickly floated to the door but didn't open it immediately. Instead, it stuck its eyes through the wood. Johan had told it never to open the door without checking it might be a bad guy. Gastly saw a young man with short, auburn hair and a ruggedly handsome face. He wore a black investigator's uniform, and a cloak draped from his shoulders. It was Lance, standing right at their door. Gastly's eyes met Lance's. Lance gave a slight smile. You must be Mr. Johan's Pokémon, right? Hello, I'm a Dragon Moss. Caw. Before Lance could finish his introduction, Gastly withdrew its head and started yelling inside. You won't believe who's here. Hey, it's Dodo. Lance. Footsteps and scolding followed from inside the house. Stop shouting. Click. The door creaked open. Lance was greeted by the sight of Johan, chewing on a cherry berry, and a slightly embarrassed-looking Gastly, who was now covering its head with shadowy hands. Mr. Lance. Johan's face showed genuine surprise. He really was here to see him? Lance seemed equally surprised. Mr. Johan, you recognize me? Gastly's reaction earlier had already seemed strange to Lance. He hadn't completely understood what Gastly said, but it almost seemed familiar with him. Johan chuckled. The famous young investigator of Kanto, Lance the Dragon Master, who wouldn't recognize you? Please, come in. He stepped aside to let Lance in. Sorry to intrude. Caw, Gastly greeted him again with a grin. Gastly. Then, out of nowhere, Gastly pulled out a phone and rapidly scrolled through the screen with its tongue until it found Lance's promotional photo. Seeing this, Lance couldn't help but understand. Have you had breakfast? Johan asked as he led Lance inside. After entering, Lance instinctively scanned the room. Despite its small size and modest decor, the house felt quite cozy and warm, giving him an unexpected sense of comfort. Thank you, I've already eaten, Lance replied. There's not much to offer here, but have a bottle of moo milk, Johan suggested. Thanks. The two of them sat at the dining table. After some small talk, Lance got straight to the point. So that's basically it. My Aerodactyl seems fine most of the time, but in heated battles or intense training, it tends to lose control. The Pokémon Center couldn't find anything wrong either. Johan murmured, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. Intermittent, manic episodes of losing control. He paused, then asked, how did you find out about me? I don't exactly have a big reputation. It was Drake who recommended you, Lance explained with a smile. And besides, you were quite well known at Silver Academy. So, he did his homework. Well, that made sense. Lance was an investigator from Kanto, so looking up his background at Silver Academy wouldn't be hard. It seemed like Drake was finding ways to keep him busy. When Lance mentioned Drake, it triggered Johan's memory. Lance pulled out an old, yellowed book titled The Art of Fear from his coat. By the way, I didn't come empty-handed. I heard you train a Gastly, so I brought a little gift. Hopefully, it's of some use. What's this? Johan asked, intrigued. Caw. Gastly peered over his shoulder, its eyes lighting up as if discovering a new toy. Its red tongue was practically twitching in excitement. Fear? Gastly knew a thing or two about that. As Johan flipped through a few pages, his expression turned slightly odd. Lance explained, I don't have much expertise with ghost or poison types, so I sought help from Agatha, Kanto's ghost-type master. She was quite reluctant, but when I mentioned I was giving it to you, Mr. Johan, she hesitated for only a moment before agreeing. Of course, Lance had to pay a certain price for it, but he didn't feel the need to mention that. Lance tilted his head, puzzled. Do you know Agatha personally? Johan wiped away the beads of sweat forming on his brow. Personally? Not even close. But then, he remembered something important: his research paper. The one that Professor Oak had praised and commented on. Better not delve into the messy, drama-like history of Agatha and Oak's long-standing love-hate relationship. As Johan looked at the title of the notes, he felt as if a shadowy old woman holding a cane was standing right in front of him, whispering. Kid, you choose this guide, or Oak. Johan quickly handed the notes to Gastly, instructing it to keep them well hidden and never take them out casually. Caw. Gastly nodded vigorously, grinning from ear to ear. Cough, I definitely don't know Agatha. So, let's focus on Aerodactyl, shall we? Alright. Lance didn't press further on that subject. Let me have a look at Aerodactyl in person, Johan suggested. Here? Lance asked. Aerodactyl would never fit in Johan's small apartment. Even if it did, given its current issues, it could easily cause unnecessary damage. In fact, summoning it anywhere within the city's boundaries or even in Rustborough's outskirts might not be the best idea. Johan pursed his lips thoughtfully. Not in the city. We'll need to head to the outskirts, at the very least. He imagined Aerodactyl was quite powerful. I agree, Lance nodded. Give me a moment to change clothes, Johan said as he headed towards his room. Lance nodded and waited silently. Chapter 49, Do you want an opponent? Rustborough City, eastern outskirts. Come out, Aerodactyl, Lance called as he tossed a pokeball. In a flash of red light, a powerful and majestic Aerodactyl appeared. Roar! Its roar echoed through the woods, a true sight of a flying-type Pokémon. Caw. It can fly. Gastly's eyes twinkled with excitement. Say what you want about anything else, but Lance's Pokémon sure were cool. Johan. Lance glanced over at Johan. From what Johan could observe so far, Aerodactyl didn't seem to have any obvious problems. However, it was evident that since Lance had only recently captured it, there wasn't much trust or connection between them yet. Of course, with only a brief look, Johan couldn't possibly diagnose the problem. Otherwise, he wouldn't be a Pokémon psychologist, he'd be a miracle worker. Can you have it use a move? Anything will do, Johan requested. Lance nodded. Alright, Aerodactyl, Dragon Dance. Lance commanded firmly. Roar! Aerodactyl let out a piercing roar, flaring up its imposing presence. Its massive wings beat the air, propelling it skyward as a powerful gust shook the surrounding trees and bushes. Johan couldn't help but twitch his mouth slightly. Was the dragon dance necessary just to show off? Nevertheless, while Aerodactyl executed its move, Johan's vision shifted, and he observed a Pokédex-like display appear in front of him. Aerodactyl. Type: Rock/Flying. Ability: Pressure. Known moves: Bite, Ancient Power, Supersonic, Wing Attack, Scary Face, Rock Slide, Roar, Crunch, Iron Head, Takedown, Stone Edge, Dragon Dance, Thunder Fang, Ice Fang, Fire Fang, Dragon Breath. Emotion: Neutral/Disheartened, this isn't its era. Condition: Excellent, it's recovering well. Friendliness level: 0, look at me, you ground-crawling insect. The fierce survivor of a bygone age. Johan noted. His gaze shifted to Gastly hovering beside him. This little guy is over 1,000 years old too, isn't it? Caw. Gastly cocked its head, noticing Johan's stare. Licking its tongue with its usual eerie grin, Gastly looked positively adorable. Returning his focus, Johan gently rubbed his chin. It's not a severe issue. It's likely that the changes in the era and environment are overwhelming it. Its primal nature and long slumber have caused it to experience bouts of heightened emotional instability. Can it be cured? Lance asked, concern evident in his voice. Given enough time, it would likely recover on its own, though this might take 3 to 5 years. 3 to 5 years. Before Lance could react, Johan continued, however, if combined with psychological treatment and physical interventions, it could be much quicker. Lance exhaled in relief. While restoring Aerodactyl's combat effectiveness was a secondary concern, what mattered most to him was alleviating its pain. What should we do? If I were you. Caw. Gastly suddenly cried out. It's flying away. Hey! Both Lance and Johan turned to look at Aerodactyl. The mighty Pokémon, still empowered by its dragon dance, was now rapidly flapping its wings, heading towards the distant mountains with increasing speed and urgency. The sudden development made both men's expressions darken. What's happening? They were already well beyond the capture range of the Pokeball. That's the Green Hills range up ahead. According to the map of the Hone region, Rustboro City was located in the far west, with the Green Hills to the east, followed by Verdant Turf Town. If Aerodactyl flew into those dense mountains, it would be nearly impossible to track it down. I'll chase it. Lance immediately jumped onto Charizard's back and turned to Johan, who advised, don't try to stop it, let's see what it's after. Lance hesitated for a moment, then nodded. All right. With a powerful beat of its wings, Charizard also executed a dragon dance and took off, gradually catching up to Aerodactyl. Caw, Gastly swallowed nervously. Do they not get dizzy? Each Pokémon had its own style for performing dragon dance, but all involved some degree of movement, like spiraling upwards. Charizard had spun around so many times while accelerating earlier, how could it not be dizzy? Johan's face darkened slightly. Is dizziness really the problem here? After a brief pause, Johan said, let's follow them. The wild areas in the Pokémon world are not safe far from it. As a Pokémon Academy instructor, Johan was fully aware of this. However, they were still near Rustboro City, and given that Devon Corporation had been driving wild Pokémon away while working on the Rusturf Tunnel project, as long as they didn't wander too deep, the danger shouldn't be too high. Still, there were bound to be some lower level, more docile Pokémon around. In the thick grass, Johan could see numerous wild Pokémon moving about. He even noticed several bug catchers squatting near the tall grass. They seemed eager to battle him, but Johan wisely decided to pretend not to see them. We're all struggling here, no point taking their allowance money. And they don't have much anyway. Fortunately, Aerodactyl didn't fly too far. It landed in front of a recently excavated tunnel entrance before reaching the deeper parts of Green Hills. There were quite a few large machines around, and the forested area and nearby hillsides had been significantly disrupted. There were hardly any signs of wild Pokémon in the vicinity anymore. Johan frowned slightly. This is the damage humans and their activities cause to nature and the wild Pokémon. Aerodactyl's sudden arrival seemed to have startled many Devon Corporation workers, as several Machoks and Golems stood on alert around the perimeter. The construction crew leader was busy on a phone call. Johan quickly approached and pulled out the Devon Corporation consultant ID that Joseph had given him the previous day. Sorry, we won't be here long, Johan reassured. Seeing the badge, the crew leader hesitated briefly, then nodded and spoke a few more words into the phone before hanging up. Consultant, sir, this. Johan shook his head, opting not to go into details. He continued forward, where he saw Lance and Charizard standing nearby, both with complicated expressions. Aerodactyl had already landed. It was clutching a piece of dirt-covered amber in its claws, letting out low, sorrowful cries that carried a sense of melancholy and helplessness. Aerodactyl had a known fondness for amber, perhaps because it reminded them of their ancient comrades. After all, unlike Lance's naturally awakened Aerodactyl, most of the others nowadays had been revived from amber extracted for their DNA. Perhaps this amber contained traces of one of its kin. Caw, Gastly murmured softly, feeling a slight resonance with Aerodactyl's situation. Johan patted Gastly's misty form, feeling the tingling in his fingers as he offered a reassuring look. Caw, Gastly's eyes became wavy. I have Johan, I'm not alone. Johan, Aerodactyl. Lance opened his mouth, struggling to find the right words. I know someone who might be able to help it, Johan sighed as he pulled out a cherry berry. Lance's eyes lit up with hope. However, that's only a temporary fix. Aerodactyl still needs to regain its confidence, or rather, establish a new goal. A new goal. Crunch. As Johan bit into the berry, he continued speaking clearly, for a former ruler of the skies like Aerodactyl, the best method is to find it a strong opponent. Should I use Charizard, or perhaps Gyarados? Your Pokémon won't work. They're too familiar, and that won't help. And if the opponent's too distant in strength, it could create internal conflicts. You need someone else. Hearing this, Lance subconsciously glanced at Gastly. Gastly shivered nervously. Caw. What are you planning? Why are you looking at me with those scheming eyes? Sending it against Aerodactyl would be overkill. Gastly isn't strong enough, Johan noted. Besides, if Aerodactyl is a sky ruler, its ideal opponent should also be a flying type. Gastly exhaled a sigh of relief. That almost scared the life out of me. Lance scratched his head, deep in thought. Maybe Winona? But she's still not quite strong enough. Don't worry, I've already got someone in mind, Johan assured as he pulled out his phone and dialed a number. Johan. Came the voice from the other end. Hey, Steven, do you want an opponent? I'll bring one over in a bit. Hey. Chapter 50, I'll only teach once. Steven's estate. Johan, Lance. Steven greeted them with a smile as he stepped out to welcome the two, his gaze lingering on Lance beside Johan. Oh, so Johan meant Steven when he mentioned an opponent, Lance remarked with a chuckle. Clearly, Steven and Lance were acquainted. After all, one was the youngest investigator in the Kanto region and a member of the Dragon Clan, while the other was the heir of Devon Corporation. Both were well-known figures, and even if they hadn't met in person before, it was inevitable that they'd know of each other. Lance was a little older than Steven, around the same age as Johan. The two knowing each other made things easier, sparing Johan the need for lengthy introductions. He simply explained the situation to them. Aerodactyl. Steven's eyes lit up with interest. As a steel and rock-type Pokémon enthusiast, Steven was naturally familiar with Aerodactyl. However, these Pokémon weren't easy to find. Even with the option to extract DNA from fossils to revive them, good fossils were hard to come by. But that wasn't the focus at the moment. Steven, bring out your Skarmory, Johan suggested. All right, Steven replied without hesitation and tossed out a Pokeball. Whoosh! A gust of wind swept past them, and in front of the group appeared a sleek, armored Skarmory, its silvery steel armor gleaming in the light. Lance's eyes lit up slightly at the sight. A very impressive Skarmory. It's been trained exceptionally well. Johan agreed silently. Lance had the experience to judge such matters accurately. Ka. Skarmory landed beside Steven and nuzzled him affectionately. Steven laughed and gave it a gentle pat. This was Steven and Skarmory's advantage. Their bond was much stronger than that between Lance and his Aerodactyl. Johan glanced over at Gastly, as if saying, looks like we won't need you to step in after all. Caw. Gastly exhaled in relief, understanding Johan's unspoken message. Johan pulled Steven aside to explain what he needed to do. So, you want my Skarmory to defeat Lance's Aerodactyl? Steven asked for clarification. No, Johan shook his head. Not just defeat Skarmory, needs to crush it. Crush it? Steven blinked. Remember what you did to Roxanne's Geodude not long ago? Something like that, but not as harsh, Johan explained. Steven glanced over at Lance and his Aerodactyl with a wary look. Did they somehow offend Johan? He wondered. But Johan, Steven said helplessly, you want me to beat Lance and his Aerodactyl? That I can try, but to crush it. Steven was confident in his abilities, but he also knew a bit about Lance's strength. The gap wasn't so wide that he could claim to crush him, especially given the current bond between Lance and Aerodactyl. Did Skarmory learn the moves I recommended? Johan asked. It did. Then use that strategy. You'll be fine. Steven rubbed his temples. But I haven't practiced it. Up until now, Steven's battle style had mostly relied on aggressive strategies, considering his Pokémon's strengths. With his team, he never needed complicated tactics against most of his peers. Not having practiced this unfamiliar strategy, Steven wasn't particularly confident. Losing was one thing, but what if it worsened Aerodactyl's state? That's fair. Habits and strategies in battles aren't something that change overnight. It takes time to adapt. How about you take over, Johan? Steven suggested cautiously. Caw. Sigma, LLL, Gastly frantically shook its head in refusal. If that's the case, we'll have to settle for a backup plan, Johan sighed. Use Metagross instead. Ideally, it would be better to stimulate Aerodactyl's fighting spirit by using a flying-type Pokémon. But Steven didn't feel confident enough. Given their slight age difference, Johan had to adjust. All right, Steven agreed. The battle commenced between Steven's Metagross and Lance's Aerodactyl. Two future champions facing off. Johan was excited to see the outcome. Isn't this a sneak peek at the Masters 8 tournament? Johan thought to himself. This is better than those unintelligible matchups, right? Johan and Gastly settled on a bench nearby to watch the showdown. Crunch, crunch. Gastly held a bucket of popcorn, looking like it was about to enjoy a great show. Where did that come from? Johan asked, bewildered. Gastly glanced over at a nearby Sunflora scurrying away, chuckling mischievously. I swear it gave it to me voluntarily. Do you believe me? Johan was speechless for a moment. That's Sunflora, not Popcorn Flora, never mind. Not bad. Next time, a bit more sugar would be great, he commented as he grabbed a handful himself. Who do you think will win? Steven, Johan answered without hesitation. How long had Lance had that Aerodactyl? Not long enough to build a strong bond. Besides, with the type disadvantage, it wasn't a fair fight. Oh. You have no idea that my plan is killing 3 birds with 1 stone, Johan muttered. Hey? Lance's Aerodactyl needed a challenge to refocus its drive. Steven's Metagross needed a confidence boost, and this was a great chance to build that confidence. That's only 2? And then there's Steven. Johan continued, Steven also needs a rival, one close in strength, or even slightly stronger. This will ignite his passion for training Pokémon. Finding a rival for Steven among his peers was nearly impossible. But Lance, who was a couple of years older, was just the right fit. It was also part of Joseph's request to Johan. Gastly nodded thoughtfully, giving Johan a thumbs up made of mist. Clever. While they were talking, the battle between Steven and Lance had begun. Aerodactyl, Dragon Dance. Lance called out. As expected, Lance chose to boost Aerodactyl's stats right away. Given Aerodactyl's disadvantage in type, he needed to start by leveling the playing field. Following Johan's advice, Lance needed to command Aerodactyl at full strength for the treatment to work. Metagross, use Bullet Punch to get close, then Metal Claw. Steven responded. Right from the start, Steven and Metagross showed their experience and coordination. Using the priority move Bullet Punch, Metagross seized the initiative. Its massive claw slashed forward, dealing significant damage to Aerodactyl. Roar! Aerodactyl's eyes began to turn red. Aerodactyl! Lance called out. Stay calm. He had expected to lose the initiative temporarily while using Dragon Dance, but he planned to turn the tables once the setup was complete. Fire Fang! Boom! Flames ignited around Aerodactyl's fangs. Steven smiled confidently, Metagross, use Ice Punch. Ice met fire as Metagross endured the blow from Fire Fang and countered with an ice-coated fist, landing a solid hit on Aerodactyl's wings. Being close to Metagross nullified Aerodactyl's speed advantage. And luck seemed to be on Steven's side this time. Frost spread across Aerodactyl's wings. Follow up with another Metal Claw. Steven ordered. Lance frowned and gritted his teeth. Bite it. Then use Fire Fang again. Meanwhile, Johan sighed as he observed the battle. The intense exchange of blows was fun to watch, but Johan couldn't help but furrow his brow slightly. Steven had the upper hand and was capitalizing on it well, but this wasn't enough. A few minutes later. Boom! Metagross's Thunder Punch sent Aerodactyl crashing to the ground. The final blow. Krrroo! Metagross roared triumphantly. Lance rushed over to the fallen Aerodactyl immediately. Aerodactyl quickly regained consciousness within seconds, its eyes bloodshot as it seemed on the verge of losing control again. There was a hint of frustration in its gaze, but not enough to mark Metagross as its new rival. Lance and Steven both noticed this as well. So it really has to be Skarmory? Johan pondered. Or should we try again? Johan turned his attention to Skarmory, who seemed invigorated and eager for another round. Johan, it looks like that wasn't enough, Steven remarked as he approached. I saw, Johan acknowledged. He was deep in thought, not noticing the glance Steven and Gastly exchanged. Since he had taken on Lance's request to treat Aerodactyl, he needed to find a way to help as much as possible. Can't let my reputation suffer. How about, you try, Johan? Steven suggested. Caw. Gastly was stunned. You're still looking at me, aren't you? No, what I meant was, why don't you command Skarmory? Steven clarified. I'm sure Skarmory would listen to you. Caw. Gastly looked at Johan with doubt. Are you up to it? Johan's eye twitched, and he stood up slowly. It's my responsibility to heal, but first, I'll try to understand Skarmory's capabilities. Steven's face brightened with hope, and he exchanged a quick glance with Gastly. Gastly slyly raised 3 misty fingers. 3 packs of poke blocks, like we agreed. An hour later. All right, Johan returned with Skarmory. Steven, I'll only teach this once. Chapter 51, Instructional Battle. Rental Battle. A rental battle involves using borrowed Pokémon instead of your own. It's an essential test for trainers. After all, commanding someone else's Pokémon is quite challenging. Not knowing the Pokémon's abilities or moves requires trainers to be knowledgeable and adaptable. It's also a test of their quick thinking and ability to strategize. In fact, rental battles are not uncommon in the Pokémon world. Battle Factory, Battle Tent, Battle Tower all have similar formats. In Pokémon Adventures, Emerald Chapter, one of the protagonists, Greta, is known to be highly skilled in rental battles and has an impressive 100-win streak. It's not just trainers, rangers also rely on wild Pokémon, which is a similar concept. Skarmory. Type, Steel, Flying. Ability, Keen Eye. Known moves, Wing Attack, Slash, Steel Wing, Payback, Drill Peck, Metal Sound, Spikes, Pluck, Stealth Rock, Whirlwind, Substitute, Roost, Taunt, Iron Defense, Protect, Toxic. Mood, excited, anxious, will this really work? Condition, excellent, ready for battle. Friendship, 50, we bathe together, after all. This is the information Johan could see about Steven's Skarmory. Steven really trained it well, especially with the sheer number of moves evidence of his money power. Some of the moves included in Johan's strategy were already known by Skarmory and at a decent level of mastery. Johan had simply added a few more into the mix. This preparation was part of what gave Johan confidence going into the battle. During the time Lance was busy getting Aerodactyl back into battle shape, Johan took the opportunity to put Skarmory through a quick, 1-hour intensive crash course. It was to establish a basic sense of strategy and understanding between them for smoother coordination in the battle. Of course, this bond couldn't compare to what Steven shared with his Skarmory. However, Lance's bond with Aerodactyl wasn't exactly flawless either. Plus, Aerodactyl had just suffered a loss. Even if it had been healed up, it was far from being in peak condition without proper treatment at a Pokémon Center. Not to mention, Skarmory had a type advantage. All in all, the advantage is mine. Nearby, Steven and Metagross had taken Johan's previous spot on the bench. Unashamedly, Steven reached into Gastly's popcorn bucket, grabbed a handful, and shared some with Metagross. Crunch, crunch. Why does this popcorn taste like sunflower seeds? Caw. Stare. Gastly glared at Steven's hand, its face full of discontent. But, considering that Steven was Johan's student, just this once, it decided to forgive him. Definitely not because Metagross was watching. Hey, do you think Johan will win? Steven asked. Caw. Gastly shook its head. No idea. Steven's expression twitched. Then again, Johan doesn't usually do things he's not confident about, Steven mused. Caw. Gastly nodded in agreement. At that moment, they saw Johan walk onto the battlefield and raise a single finger. I'm only going to demonstrate this once. Steven's face immediately turned serious. He had always believed that the strength Johan showed wasn't just what he revealed on the surface. This feeling only grew stronger the more they interacted. Especially when Johan handed him that strategy manual for Skarmory. Johan, just how deeply have you hidden your strength? On the battlefield, Lance had finished calming down Aerodactyl and was getting serious. Anyone who earned praise from Drake was undoubtedly not to be underestimated. While his bond with Aerodactyl wasn't at its peak, it was surely stronger than the bond Johan had with Steven's Skarmory. Johan had also seen Aerodactyl battle against Metagross earlier. If he was still willing to borrow someone else's Pokémon for a fight, it meant he had confidence in his strategy. Although the goal of the battle was to help Aerodactyl recover, as a trainer, Lance was getting excited. He longed to face strong opponents. Both Steven and Johan were formidable foes who demanded his full attention and concentration. Ka! Skarmory flapped its wings, eyes gleaming sharply. Don't worry, Johan reassured it, gently stroking its metallic feathers. If we lose, it's my fault. If we win, it's all thanks to you. No pressure, just give it your best. Ka! Skarmory's respect for Johan grew even more. Begin. At Steven's signal, both Johan and Lance focused their attention on the battle. Aerodactyl, Stone Edge. Lance commanded, sweeping aside his cape dramatically. This time, instead of opening with Dragon Dance, he decided to take the offensive immediately. Changing tactics? Well, no matter how he changes it. Skarmory, block with Stealth Rock. Aerodactyl's body radiated an earthy glow, and sharp rocks seemed to sprout from its body. With a powerful flap of its wings, it sent the stone blades flying at Skarmory. At the same time, Skarmory's eyes flashed yellow, and rocks also began to hover in midair before fading from sight, as if erased. Aerodactyl's stone edge collided with these invisible rocks, producing a series of explosive sounds. Using Stealth Rock for defense? Lance was taken aback. Still, some of the stones pierced through and headed towards Skarmory. Take them head on and use Iron Defense. Johan's voice was calm. His demeanor helped steady Skarmory's nerves. Flapping its wings, Skarmory closed them around its body, blocking the incoming stones while its metallic feathers gleamed brightly. Iron Defense greatly boosted its physical defense. For a physically durable Pokémon like Skarmory, this was a substantial upgrade, creating pressure on Aerodactyl, which relied heavily on physical attacks. Aerodactyl, get in close with Thunder Fang. Toxic. Speed-wise, Skarmory was no match for Aerodactyl, but the stealth rocks previously laid out served as obstacles. In a one-on-one scenario, the typical spikes and whirlwinds strategy wouldn't work. After all, that strategy functions better in turn-based games, which differ significantly from real-world battles. It could be borrowed but not copied exactly. For example, Johan cleverly utilized Stealth Rock as both a shield and a hindrance to Aerodactyl's mobility. Bzzzt. Golden electricity surged across Skarmory's body, dealing considerable damage. Yet, the virulent toxins also seeped into Aerodactyl, causing its skin to take on a faint purple hue. It had been poisoned with toxic. Lance's face darkened. He realized he had to finish the fight quickly. All right, Aerodactyl, use Fire Fang. This time, unlike the previous matchup with Metagross, where Steven had successfully exploited his advantage, Lance's aggressive tactics brought Aerodactyl closer, seizing the initiative. Skarmory, substitute. Boom. Flames erupted, but they only burned through Skarmory's decoy feathers. Lance had a sinking feeling in his gut. The poison's effects were becoming increasingly evident on Aerodactyl. However, he couldn't afford to panic, or he would lose focus. Aerodactyl, use Supersonic. Taunt. Steven's eyes widened. Did Johan read Lance's move? Luck? Coincidence? Or a true prediction? Aerodactyl's Supersonic was forcefully interrupted, causing its eyes to redden in frustration. Yet Lance, being Lance, didn't lose his cool. He quickly adjusted his strategy. Aerodactyl, Dragon Breath. Switching from Supersonic to Dragon Breath? Impressive adaptation, Lance, Johan silently admired. The rapid change in tactics demonstrated an increasing level of synergy between Lance and Aerodactyl. Skarmory, protect. Ka! A transparent green barrier appeared. Bang! The protect move, however, has diminishing returns if used repeatedly, so even though Aerodactyl was temporarily blocked, it had to continue attacking. Fire Fang. Iron Defense. Another head-on clash, though it strained Skarmory, the double boost from Iron Defense made it bearable. Not to mention, Aerodactyl's attacks weren't even its stab, same type attack bonus, moves, allowing Skarmory to survive. Aerodactyl, Thunder Fang. Skarmory, protect. Lance. Defend, defend, defend with protect and toxic stalling until the opponent implodes. Gastly partially covered its eyes. It couldn't bear to watch. But it still peeked through its fingers, eyes sparkling. This is the magic of the Protect Toxic Substitute combo? Johan is demonstrating it for me. Steven also wore a complex expression, both awed and conflicted by what he was witnessing. Yet, the gleam in his eyes was unmistakable. If Johan had merely cracked open a door to a new world for him before, today, he kicked it wide open. At this point, the effects of toxic were taking their toll, and Aerodactyl was on the verge of losing control. Aerodactyl, hold on. Skarmory isn't in good shape either, finish it with Fire Fang. Lance's voice was filled with determination as a green aura seemed to envelop him. Roar. Aerodactyl let out a fierce roar and managed to regain its composure. Flames danced on its razor-sharp fangs as it lunged at Skarmory. Roost. Johan's calm command reached Skarmory. Roost. Gastly and Steven's jaws dropped in sync. Critical hit. That's a psychological crit, they could almost hear the mental blow to Aerodactyl and Lance. Skarmory touched down, recovering its stamina. Thanks to its double iron defense boost, it withstood Aerodactyl's flames yet again. But... Caw. That's so cheap, so ruthless, and I love it. Gastly was ecstatic. With another round of Protect Iron Defense Protect, Aerodactyl's condition deteriorated rapidly, and its stamina reached rock bottom. Johan sighed. Let's not drag this out any longer. Skarmory, finish with Brave Bird. Brave Bird, a move that deals heavy damage in exchange for recoil. Skarmory's massive defense stat, boosted thrice by Iron Defense, was maxed out. Boom. Aerodactyl crashed heavily to the ground, fully knocked out. Letting it fall due to poison would have been disrespectful. In this demonstration, Johan combined the Protect Toxic Substitute strategy with the Iron Defense Brave Bird combo, skillfully blending in techniques from the Spikes and Whirlwind method, making this lesson as thorough as could be. For some reason, Lance seemed almost relieved after losing. Chapter 52, Keep a Low Profile. We lost. Lance accepted the outcome graciously. He recalled the unconscious Aerodactyl, replaying the battle in his mind. With every replay, a chill ran down his spine. No, let's just stick to replaying the battle against Steven. Replaying the one against Johan gave him an unsettling feeling. And he made up his mind. Once he got back, every one of his Pokémon had to learn Taunt. There was no other way to counter it. No wonder Drake praises this person so highly, using another trainer's Pokémon and still pulling off such tactics. This level of strategic prowess probably surpasses most regular gym leaders. After all, he was commanding someone else's Pokémon. He didn't know Skarmory's characteristics or the proficiency of its moves. The difficulty of managing that far exceeded commanding one's own Pokémon. Moreover, Steven's Skarmory was strong yet still willing to obey Johan, which spoke volumes about Johan's ability. To Lance, Gastly seemed to be what was holding back Johan's full potential. But Johan has trained his Gastly extremely well. With Agatha's Terror Handbook in hand, his training progress is bound to be swift. Lance, blessed with Viridian Forest's power, the so-called Viridian power, could sense things to some degree, even if his control was far from perfect. Johan's future strength? It's hard to say. At least, he could reach the level of an Elite Four. Steven's eyes gleamed with excitement. That was incredible. When Johan first gave him suggestions, he took them seriously, but due to his habits, he hadn't fully implemented or practiced them yet. But today's battle had given him a real lesson. It was as if Johan was saying, "Look, Steven, this is how Skarmory should fight." He realized something important. The opponent he'd been searching for was right beside him. Why had Steven been so eager to take over the Devon Corporation? Was it solely because he worried about his father's health? Did he not like Pokémon? No. He absolutely loved Pokémon, including Pokémon battles. But when someone doesn't have to put in much effort to be one of the best among their peers, it's easy to lose enthusiasm for it over time. He loved Pokémon, but he didn't necessarily have to focus on battling, right? In contrast, taking over a company he wasn't as familiar with presented more of a challenge. However, today, he met Lance. More importantly, he witnessed Johan's strategic brilliance. He realized that there were skilled people his age after all. That Johan was so strong. Not only did Johan excel in theoretical studies, publishing papers that even received Professor Oak's praise, but he was also a Pokémon psychology expert. He raised an exceptional Gastly and demonstrated incredible tactical prowess. If Johan can excel in so many areas, why can't I? Johan's three-pronged strategy had indeed succeeded, just not in the way he might have expected. Steven's new target had slightly shifted off course. Caw. Gastly's eyes sparkled like stars. So this is the Protect Toxic Substitute combo? It had already mastered Toxic and Substitute, all it needed now was Protect. Gastly felt that as soon as it mastered that move, under Johan's guidance, it would be super powerful. It felt incredibly confident now. Kicking out champions and taking down Elite Four members one day isn't impossible at all. Caw. Well done, Skarmory. Johan smiled and extended his hand to Skarmory. Caw. Skarmory shyly turned its head, its cheeks slightly flushed, and lightly tapped Johan's hand with its wing before flying back to Steven. You were the one who commanded so well. Ow! Johan grimaced, clutching his now red hand, feeling the sting. He then noticed Skarmory's embarrassed demeanor. So it's a female? Johan, your command was exceptional. You've shown me your true strength. Lance approached with softened eyes and a smile, extending his hand. I look forward to facing you in a real battle someday. Don't hold your breath, Johan replied, shaking Lance's hand lightly, given how sore it was. But I have a feeling I won't have to wait too long, Lance said, glancing at Gastly, who was clearly brimming with excitement. It longs for that moment when you two will astonish the world. Johan pressed his lips together. As long as I can afford to astonish the world. By the way, about Aerodactyl. Lance finally remembered the issue with Aerodactyl after his mind had been consumed with thoughts about Protect and countering it. There shouldn't be much of an issue. After Skarmory's thorough, stimulation, its new goal is clear. The fact that it didn't lose control at the end is proof enough, Johan reassured him. Lance nodded. That made sense. However, to be safe, I'll record a relaxation hypnosis audio clip for you. Just play it for Aerodactyl each day to reinforce its recovery. Thank you. No problem. Since he had taken on the task, he was determined to do it well. Fortunately, Aerodactyl's condition wasn't too severe, so a combination of physical treatment and psychological support would suffice. Oh, one more thing. Lance seemed to remember something, rummaging through his belongings until he produced a pendant shaped like a dragon's claw. I didn't really prepare anything for you, so please accept this Sharp Fang as a token of my gratitude. Sharp Fang, a held item that grants the Pokémon a chance to make its opponent flinch when using any move that normally wouldn't cause a flinch. This item is perfect for Gastly. Well, I shouldn't after all, you already gave me the Terror Handbook. Johan adeptly took the Sharp Fang. That was the treatment fee, and this is a courtesy gift. It's different. Seeing Johan accept it, Lance didn't say much more. Steven and Gastly also joined them. Speaking of which, teacher, I should thank you for the lesson too. Here, I accidentally bought an extra Protect trademark last time. Caw. Before Johan could respond, Gastly had already snatched the trademark with its tongue. Protect. You guys really don't have to. Johan accepted the trademark from Gastly. We're all friends here. Your thoughts alone are enough. After chatting and exchanging training and battle insights for a while, the trio parted ways. Over the Hone region seas, Charizard's wings beat steadily, carrying Lance back to the Kanto region. Yes, Drake, it's all taken care of. Johan is very skilled, incredibly skilled. After hanging up, another call came in. Seeing the name displayed, Lance smiled. Winona. Yes, everything's fine. He's a Pokémon psychologist, but also a skilled trainer, tactically brilliant. Too bad you couldn't see it. Oh? I forgot about that. Even though this wasn't an official mission, the field recorder was still on. It's not a mission or classified information, so it's fine to show you. He detached a small camera clip to his shoulder and cape. I've sent it. Agatha's calling, I'll talk to you later. In the rural Devon estate. Skarmory, let's refine our strategy. Steven rolled up his sleeves, his eyes alight with enthusiasm. Not far away, Joseph, accompanied by a floating cast form, smiled as he watched. How long has it been since I saw Steven so happy? Johan only visited once, and Steven had already rekindled his passion for Pokémon. This reassured Joseph that his decision a few days ago was the right one. Woo! Cast form happily circled around him. Right? Maybe it's time to give Johan a raise. Woo woo. Oh, and help Steven get registered for the competition. Caca. Gastly followed Johan into the apartment complex, exuding confidence. Keep it low-key, Johan couldn't help but say. Whether human or ghost, you've got to learn humility. Don't get swayed by superficial things. Beep, beep. Johan's phone chimed. When he looked at it, he saw a message. Evie eats cabbage, time for relaxation. Grain in the field, on my way. Caca. Gastly blinked, puzzled. Superficial things? Chapter 53, Can we get a subscription? Caca. Is she asleep? Gastly, clinging to the ceiling with the Protect trademark, saw Johan come in from the balcony and asked. Yeah, Johan nodded. He had an odd feeling. For some reason, it seemed like this Evie eats cabbage was even more enthusiastic about hypnotherapy than Feebas was. But it didn't matter. In the end, it was all to help Feebas. And besides, the payment had been quite generous. How's Protect coming along? Easy to learn. Johan asked with a smile as he watched the serious-looking Gastly after finishing up his nightly routine. Gastly, self-proclaimed as exceptionally gifted, seemed quite confident. However, mastering Protect wasn't the same as learning Substitute. Caca. Of course, it's a piece of cake. Gastly stuck out its tongue, its eyes flashing with a hint of nervousness, but it still gave a firm response. Johan didn't want to crush Gastly's confidence, so he simply smiled and turned to his own tasks. Relieved, Gastly let out a breath. Close call. But then it steeled its gaze, determined. It had to master Protect, or else its genius reputation would crumble. Floating down to the desk, Gastly carefully opened a metal tin, trying to be as quiet as possible so Johan wouldn't notice. Inside the box were 2 types of poke blocks left over from the special training in Lava Ridge Town, orange and red. Which one was for boosting special attack? Whatever. Both together would be even better. Gastly gulped, and its tongue darted out. It swallowed all the remaining poke blocks at once. Hiss. The intense heat and bitterness exploded in its mouth, nearly making it breathe fire. Gastly. I regret everything. But the jolt from the poke block's spicy, bitter flavors definitely made it more alert. Meanwhile, Johan was sitting at his desk, flipping through Agatha's Terror Handbook. The more he read, the more cold sweat began to drip down his forehead. Toxic Orb, Black Sludge, Spell Tag, Cursed Amulet, Trevenant's Root, Yamisk's Mask. All these items combined would cost tens of millions of poke dollars, easy. Not to mention the regular expenses and move training costs. To raise just one Jengar, Agatha must have spent at least 50 million. Johan glanced at the red-faced, panting Gastly. Is this really a Pokémon? This is a gold-eating monster. Caca. Gastly noticed Johan's stare. They locked eyes for a moment before both looked away in a panic. He didn't see me sneak those poke blocks, right? This manual can't fall into Gastly's hands. Late at night. In the velvet sky above, a flawless full moon shone with quiet brilliance. Every so often, a Fusobat flew by the window, hunting the last mosquitoes of autumn. Johan let out a long yawn, eyes tearing up from fatigue. It had been a long time since he'd stayed up this late reading. He had to admit, Agatha's Terror Handbook was immensely insightful. It gave him clear guidance on how to train Gastly and a solid plan for its eventual evolution. Gastly, aren't you tired yet? Closing the Terror Handbook, Johan turned to look at Gastly. The sight made him jump. Gastly's eyes were bloodshot, its lips dry, its tongue lolling, and even its dark aura seemed to be fading. It looked utterly exhausted, as if it had been drained 8 or 9 times over. Caca, caca. Nothing to it, piece of cake. Did you, actually master it? Johan asked, astonished. Caca. Of course. Absolutely not. It was so hard. Tears welled up in its eyes. Gastly. Johan sighed in relief. He was really worried Gastly would master Protect so quickly, and then he'd have to buy another trademark. Don't worry, we've got plenty of time. There's no rush, Johan said reassuringly. Caca. I can only get halfway. Halfway? Johan raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Caca. Gastly's expression changed, and it concentrated. Black mist swirled around it, and a faint green shield appeared, but it only covered half of Gastly's body. Still, getting halfway meant the full move couldn't be far off. Caw. Seeing Johan's stunned expression, Gastly waved its tongue in front of him. Slurp. When Johan didn't respond, Gastly licked his face. The shock snapped Johan out of it. Seeing Gastly's puzzled expression, he pulled out a cherry berry and took a bite. It's nothing. Just suddenly remembered something important. Feigning nonchalance, Johan took out his phone. As luck would have it, there were actually messages waiting for him. Evie eats cabbage. Someone barged into my house late at night, talking about some new strategy and woke me up. Now I'm wide awake and can't sleep. What should I do? Someone challenged her at this hour? Johan winced. That person was either an idiot or had serious issues. Seeing the message was from just a few minutes ago, Johan started typing a response. But before he could hit send, another message came in. Evie eats cabbage, the moon is so full tonight. Attached was a photo. At first glance, it was a beautiful full moon, its pale light illuminating a patch of grass and a lone tree. The scene was quite serene. But on closer inspection, cold sweat trickled down Johan's back. There was a figure hanging from the branches, seemingly in black jeans, with what looked like a red afro, and beneath the tree lay a fainted houndoom. What the? He hesitated, then typed a response. This client paid well and would be essential to raising Gastly. Grain in the field, so, do you need a relaxation session? Johan sighed internally. How did a Pokémon psychologist end up becoming a sleep therapist? Evie eats cabbage, can I get a subscription? Monthly? Or maybe yearly? Johan. Johan cleared his throat awkwardly. Gastly, don't wander off. I need to make a call. With that, he headed to the balcony. Caw. Gastly watched him leave, eyes misty with emotion. Working so late just to raise me. I need to try even harder. Bathed in moonlight, Johan dialed a voice call. Hello. The voice on the other end sounded lazy. But before Johan could say anything, something below caught his eye. He saw a shadowy figure hurrying across the courtyard, chased by a Golbat and two Zubat. The bats swooped down, occasionally attacking the dark shape. Golbat chasing a mook? What is this, a Pokémon soap opera? Hello? The voice from the phone asked again. Hold on a second, Johan muttered, then called into the apartment, Gastly. Caw. Gastly floated out immediately, curiosity on its face. Johan gestured downwards and said, help it out. Mook might be a bit of a mess, but it wasn't known for harming people. Plus, Johan had fed it poke blocks before. Just then, a painful howl came from the shadowy figure. Wait, that wasn't Mook's voice. Gastly didn't need any further prompting, it darted down from the balcony in a flash. Johan stuffed his phone into his pocket and ran out of the apartment. Following the sounds, he finally found Gastly in a narrow alley, standing protectively in front of a filthy, mud-splattered creature. Gastly was staring down the Golbat and two Zubat. Johan approached the creature covered in garbage, noticing a trail of red that stood out starkly against the ground. Oh. A weak whimper reached his ears. Getting closer, despite the awful smell, Johan moved briskly. He saw 6 tails matted together with sticky sludge. Chapter 54, Alolan Vulpix. Caw. Seeing Gastly and Johan dare to block its way, Golbat got angry, letting out a furious cry. At its command, the two Zubat instantly opened their mouths wide, unleashing supersonic. Caw. Gastly cackled, and the black mist around its body began to swirl. A portion of the mist detached from Gastly, forming a dense cloud between itself and the sound waves. The supersonic vibrations passed harmlessly between the two wisps of fog, failing to disrupt Gastly at all. In the next moment, Golbat saw 2 grinning Gastlys in front of it. Gastly, make it quick. It's badly injured and needs to get to the Pokémon Center immediately. Caw. Gastly responded with a determined nod. Meanwhile, crouched on the ground, Johan ignored the filthy state of the small creature, trying to press his hand over its wound. Blood oozed between his fingers. Oh. The little creature whimpered and struggled, clearly resisting Johan's touch. Johan softened his voice. I'm not a bad person. The words seemed to trigger something in the little Pokémon, and its struggles intensified. As it thrashed, its wound reopened, and blood pooled on the ground. It let out a trembling, frightened growl, baring its tiny fangs in an attempt to look fierce. In the moonlight, its crystal blue eyes, resembling polished gemstones, reflected fear and Johan's gentle smile. The sight overlapped with something in its memory, leaving it confused. But it also recalled a night when someone had given it the best meal it had ever tasted. The little Pokémon's struggles eased, just slightly. Johan saw the hesitation in the Vulpix's eyes and felt a weight settle in his heart. Another Pokémon hurt and abandoned by humans. Vulpix wasn't an uncommon species, and given its cuteness, it was highly sought after, second only to Pokémon like Eevee and Piku. Many owners kept Vulpix as a domestic pet. But some more superstitious people feared it. Because of ancient legends about the nine-tailed fox, some people viewed Vulpix and Ninetales as sinister creatures. Judging by this little one's temperament, it hadn't been a very suitable pet to begin with. Johan thought of a certain patient he once had. Someone who wanted to build an ideal society, a mathematical magician. To a degree, Johan could understand his ideals. Caca. Gastly floated over, having already dealt with the two Zubat. Golbat lay unconscious on the ground, minus a couple of teeth. Johan didn't fuss over the missing teeth and instead gave a quick command to Gastly, put it to sleep with hypnosis. Johan's own hypnotic techniques required cooperation or catching the subject off guard. But this Vulpix was on high alert and injured, so Gastly's direct approach was necessary. Caca. Gastly nodded, its eyes glowing with the blue light of hypnosis. Oh. Vulpix tried to resist, but Gastly's hypnosis quickly overcame its defenses. After a few weak attempts, the little creature fell into a deep sleep. Johan sighed. He took off his jacket and wrapped the dirty little Pokémon in it before picking it up. So much lighter than I expected. Let's go. He hailed a taxi and headed straight to the Pokémon Center. At the Rustboro Pokémon Center, Johan sat on a bench outside the emergency room, frowning as he waited. Caca. Gastly floated back and forth, looking more anxious than Johan. Calm down, Gastly. We're at the Pokémon Center, it should be fine now, Johan tried to reassure it. Caca. Do you have enough money? Johan blinked in surprise. You're worried about the money. It's enough, don't worry. Not enough. Came a gentle voice from Johan's pants pocket. Hey? Johan took out his phone, realizing that he had only locked the screen earlier and hadn't actually hung up. He lifted the phone to his ear, sighing. Hey, ma'am. Just as he was about to say something. Your account has been credited with 200,000 Poke Dollars. Current balance, 235,000 Poke Dollars. Has anyone ever told you that your voice sounds like a Lapra's? Johan said, his tone suddenly overly sweet. Caca. Gastly watched Johan's abrupt shift in expression, cold sweat dripping down its face. It felt like it had just witnessed something it shouldn't have. The voice on the other end chuckled softly before asking, is that enough? If not, I can wake up my uncle. No, it's enough, Johan said, smiling into the phone while glaring at Gastly. Click. The emergency room door opened, and Nurse Joy emerged, pushing a cart covered in a white sheet. Caca. Gastly gasped in horror. A white sheet. Did it die? Johan rolled his eyes. Relax, it's just sleeping on top of the sheet. Sure enough, Gastly saw the pristine white-furred creature lying peacefully on the soft white blanket, its 6 translucent, fluffy tails draped around it, breathing steadily. Caca. Gastly's eyes widened in disbelief. Is this the same little black ball from earlier? It was hard to reconcile the snowy Vulpix in front of it with the dirty, matted creature it had rescued. To be fair, Johan was just as astonished as Gastly. He had known it was a Vulpix, but he hadn't expected it to be an Alolan Vulpix. Or rather, an Ice-type Vulpix from Alola. How did an Alolan Vulpix end up in Hoenn? And in such a dire condition, no less. Mr. Johan, the little one is stable now, but it's severely malnourished and has lost a lot of blood. It's very weak, so it'll need proper care and nourishment. Nurse Joy knew Johan by name since he often assisted the Rustboro Police Department in calming down rampaging Pokémon, and she frequently helped with these cases. Thank you. Johan then went to settle the bill. To his surprise, he learned that although he wasn't a registered trainer, because of his consistent support of the League's Investigation Bureau and the Rustboro Police Department, he had long been granted free access to Pokémon Center services. That saved quite a bit of money. On the taxi ride home, Johan held the slumbering Alolan Vulpix in his arms. It looked like a delicate porcelain doll, its face serene as it slept. You must have been through a lot. The Vulpix instinctively snuggled deeper into Johan's arms, its nose twitching as if dreaming of something. Caw-caw, caw-caw. Gastly watched the little creature, licking its lips. Het, an Alolan Vulpix. Het. Back home, Johan carefully laid the Alolan Vulpix on his bed, managing to find a leaf-patterned blanket from who knows where. Don't scare her, she's a girl, he reminded Gastly, who was hovering nearby, eyes gleaming with curiosity. Caw-caw. Gastly looked puzzled. How do you know that? Of course, Johan had already confirmed it earlier. But he didn't bother explaining, heading out to the balcony with his phone. Meanwhile, Gastly positioned itself protectively beside the sleeping Vulpix. If Johan hadn't forbidden it, it would have licked her at least 100 times by now. Still awake. On the balcony, moonlight poured down, casting a gentle, bright glow. Yet, came the quiet, sleepy murmur from the other end of the line. It seemed like she had already drifted off to sleep. Johan decided to put off returning the treatment fee for now. Returning inside, he found Gastly already dozing off beside the Vulpix, its mouth open, snoring lightly and occasionally mumbling, caw-caw in its sleep. Het, an Alolan Vulpix. Meanwhile, in a distant bedroom, golden-haired Cynthia was curled up among a pile of adorable plush dolls. Moonlight filtered through the window, enveloping her in a soft, ethereal glow as she slept, a peaceful smile on her face. Kindness should always be met with kindness. Chapter 55, complete. The next morning. Caw-caw. Johan was startled awake by Gastly's panicked cries. He opened his sleepy eyes to see Gastly darting around the room like a headless chicken. Waking up without being numbed by a lick feels almost strange, Johan muttered, his hand instinctively reaching to his bedside table for a cherry berry. What's wrong? Did you lose your learning machine? He asked. Caw-caw caw-caw. Gastly responded, calling out anxiously. The little fox is gone. Hey? Johan suddenly remembered the new addition to their home, a Pokémon. He glanced towards the foot of the bed, but there was no sign of the Alolan Vulpix. Don't panic, he reassured Gastly. We're on the 6th floor, it's not like it jumped out of a window. The door's locked, so it's got to be somewhere in the apartment. With that, Johan hurried out of bed and began searching the apartment alongside Gastly. Caw-caw. Luckily, Gastly's ability to phase through walls and furniture paid off. It finally found the little Vulpix huddled under the corner of a wardrobe. The Vulpix had curled up tightly against the wall, hiding its head beneath its fluffy tail, with only 2 crystal blue eyes peeking out. Seeing Johan crouch down to peer at it and Gastly's mischievous grin, the Vulpix let out a warning growl. Oh oh oh! The little Pokémon bared its 2 tiny fangs, growling at them in a low, defensive tone. Adorably fierce. Caw-caw. Gastly's eyes sparkled with delight. So cute. Johan, however, felt a weight settle in his chest. The Alolan Vulpix's wariness is even worse than I thought. It likely had a lot to do with whatever it had been through. After considering for a moment, Johan grabbed a handful of poke blocks, crouched down, and extended his hand into the wardrobe's shadows. Even as a Pokémon psychologist, gaining the trust of a hurt Pokémon still required basic communication and interaction. And without the Vulpix using any abilities or moves, he couldn't read its Pokédex entry to learn more about it. As the Vulpix sniffed the aroma of the poke blocks, its blue eyes flicked warily between Johan and the offered food. Go on, eat, Johan said with a gentle smile. You lost a lot of blood yesterday, and you're still very weak. Eat something to get your strength back. Caw-caw caw-caw. Gastly encouraged the Vulpix as well, swallowing its own saliva. Poke blocks are so delicious. There's no way you can resist. The Alolan Vulpix stared at the poke blocks for a moment. Whap! Suddenly, it swatted Johan's hand away with its paw, scattering the blocks across the floor. Hiss! Johan winced, 3 scratch marks appearing on his hand as fresh blood welled up from the wounds. The Vulpix's eyes briefly showed a flash of guilt and distress before its expression hardened again. Caw-caw. Gastly hurriedly picked up each poke block with great care, blowing on them gently, as if trying to make them less dirty. Its eyes held a confused glint. This makes no sense. Poke blocks are so tasty. Gastly couldn't help but compare this moment to its own recruitment. Johan had only needed a single cup of instant ramen to win it over. The Vulpix's blue eyes watched Gastly's movements through the narrow gap beneath the wardrobe, Johan leaned against the side of the wardrobe and slowly sat down, ignoring the pain from his scratches. He was long used to minor injuries thanks to Gastly's antics, and this was no different. I remember. He began, almost talking to himself. I once had a friend, a lot like you. He ended up all alone in a foreign place, a new city, a new school. He was afraid to get close to anyone and couldn't afford to fall behind in his studies. He loved Pokémon but didn't dare raise one. He had no time, no energy, and no money. So he chose to study Pokémon psychology because he thought, the hearts of Pokémon were simpler than people's. To others, the original Johan seemed impressive. He entered Silver Academy with the highest theory scores in all of the Hoenn region. He even graduated early after finishing the coursework well ahead of schedule, only a few years older than Steven and the others. But no one knew how much he had sacrificed to achieve those grades and how much time he had given up. Ka. Gastly, who had returned to Johan's side without him noticing, was listening intently, its expression complicated. It was the first time it had ever heard Johan share this story. Hearing about someone else's struggles, even when spoken of calmly, could always bring to mind one's own experiences. Oh. A soft whimper came from beneath the wardrobe. Johan and Gastly exchanged a look, sharing a smile. This time, Johan didn't crouch down. Instead, he placed the poke blocks on a small dish and gently slid it under the wardrobe. Here, have something to eat, he offered. When you've recovered, if you want to go home, I'll take you back to Alola. But if you want to stay. Before he could finish speaking, Johan felt a cold, soft tongue lick the wound on his hand. The sensation was icy and gentle. Ka. We're back. Before Johan had even opened the door, Gastly phased through it and eagerly searched the apartment for the Alolan Vulpix. It caught a glimpse of the little white Pokémon scampering away. Looks like she's regained some energy, Johan observed as he walked in, carrying a bag. After a day of gentle reassurance, the Alolan Vulpix had become less fearful of Johan and Gastly. Considering her weakened state, Johan had taken Gastly out shopping at the department store that evening. Returning home, Johan saw Gastly waiting by the wardrobe once more. It was clear where the Vulpix had hidden again. Johan sighed inwardly. Pokémon may have simple hearts, but they were still intelligent creatures capable of thought. In some ways, their hearts were both resilient and fragile. Resilient in how they could silently endure for countless years, keeping promises. Fragile in how betrayal or abandonment could leave gaping wounds that might never heal. Vulpix, I bought you a gift, Johan said, sitting beside the wardrobe. Would you like to see it? He pulled 3 light blue bows from his pocket. Oh. The Alolan Vulpix poked her head out from under the wardrobe, eyeing the bows with bright, twinkling eyes. Can I put one on you? Johan asked gently. Oh. The Vulpix hesitated, then pulled her head back under the wardrobe. Ka. Gastly drooped its head, disappointed. Johan gave Gastly a reassuring smile. Then, in a sudden blur of white, the Vulpix darted out from under the wardrobe and leaped straight into Johan's arms. Thump! The force of the jump knocked Johan flat on his back. The Vulpix burrowed deep into Johan's embrace, her small body trembling slightly. It seemed like she had made a big decision and was feeling afraid and uncertain about it. Sensing the Vulpix's nervousness, Johan smiled softly and gently cradled her in his arms. He didn't say anything, just stroked her back slowly. After a long while, the Vulpix finally began to calm down. All right, let's get these on, Johan said, holding up the bows. He tied one around her neck and placed the other 2 on her ears. All done. Take a look. Johan held up a mirror. Oh. The Alolan Vulpix lifted her head hesitantly, her cheeks turning slightly pink. Ka. Gastly let out an excited howl, its tone almost wolf-like. They look great. I must have a good eye, Johan praised, smiling. The Vulpix's blush deepened, and she shyly lowered her head. Then, as if making another big decision, the little Pokémon leaned forward, gently licking Johan's cheek with her cool tongue. Ka. Me too. Me too. Gastly floated over, cackling gleefully, and stuck out its red tongue to lick Johan's other cheek. Slurp. One side of Johan's face began to frost over, while the other started to go numb. Johan's mouth twitched. Oddly, not too bad? Up to this point, it seemed like everything was going perfectly. However, Gastly was so excited that its tongue stretched out too far, splashing saliva onto one of Vulpix's new bows. Stare. In an instant, the Alolan Vulpix's entire demeanor changed. Her eyes glowed with a faint blue light. Caw. Sigma, LLL. Wham! Gastly was sent flying, crashing hard against the wall. Cold sweat dripped down its face. Psychic. Johan's pupils contracted. He glanced at Gastly, now plastered against the wall. Then he looked down at the Alolan Vulpix, who was blushing furiously and looking unsure of what had just happened. It seems, she isn't fully aware of her abilities. Chapter 56, Riding Lance's Coattails to Fame? Vulpix. Type, Ice. Ability, Snow Warning. Moves known, Tail Whip, Powder Snow, Disable, Ice Shard, Grudge, Icy Wind, Confuse Ray, Hex, Aurora Beam, Psychic, Hypnosis, Baby Doll Eyes. Mood, Happy, Hesitant, I'm a harbinger of misfortune. Condition, Weak, it needs supplements. Supplements. Affection level, 70, it acknowledges you, but that's not enough. When the Alolan Vulpix used Psychic, Johan was finally able to see its Pokédex entry. Simply judging by the list of moves, it was clear that this Vulpix had learned almost as many moves as Gastly. However, the moves' colors on the screen appeared quite dull, indicating a lack of proficiency. In fact, like the Psychic from earlier, the Alolan Vulpix likely wasn't even aware it could use the move. This might have been because it used to live with its group, learning moves but rarely needing to battle on its own. In reality, Alolan Vulpix are communal Pokémon, with their groups often protected by an older Ninetales. After all, in the snowy mountains of Alola, Alolan Vulpix is a primary target for Weevil. And judging by Vulpix's reaction earlier, could this little one, despite its cute appearance, actually be a hidden bundle of fury? Johan couldn't help but feel a pang of worry for his small household. Still, he smiled and pulled out a luxury ball as he spoke. Vulpix. Before he could finish, the Vulpix curiously tapped the button on the luxury ball with its paw. A flash of red light. Click. There wasn't even a hint of struggle, the luxury ball settled with an almost anticlimactic stillness. Ah, well, Johan sighed dramatically. I wanted at least a little excitement. Caw. Gastly floated back, its demeanor a little shaken. Did we get tricked by its cute and weak appearance? Johan shot Gastly a sidelong glance. Who was the one going so cute? And he just a moment ago? Gastly chuckled sheepishly. Well, it is cute. She probably doesn't even realize her own strength, Johan mused as he held the luxury ball in his hand. From now on, let's live together. The luxury ball shook slightly in response. Gastly grinned broadly, delighted to finally have a partner to spar with. Come to think of it, the Alolan Vulpix shared quite a few moves with Gastly, like Confuse Ray and Hex. Thinking about it, Johan murmured as he thoughtfully rubbed the ball in his hand. A centuries-old ghost and a fox spirit. Sounds like a setup for a mystical duo. That night, Gastly enthusiastically showed the young Vulpix around the apartment. Caw. This is the kitchen. Johan doesn't let me in here, but between you and me. Gastly lowered its voice conspiratorially. You can sneak in sometimes. Gastly puffed up with pride. Oh. The Alolan Vulpix blinked its eyes. Why would you want to go in? Caw. To secretly inhale gas, of course. I've got a technique, as long as you don't take too much at once, Johan won't notice. Oh. Gastly then led the young Vulpix to another room. Caw. This is the bathroom, where you can take baths. Gastly flashed a mischievous grin. Together, he. Oh. Startled, the Vulpix's latent psychic power surged. Caw. Elsewhere, Johan received an unexpected phone call. Lance. Is there still something wrong with Aerodactyl? From the other end of the line came Lance's somewhat awkward voice. Ahem, no, Aerodactyl's fine. Especially after listening to your hypnotic audio reinforcement. Johan, well, there's a new issue. It's not really an issue, just... Johan frowned. Lance, since when did you get so hesitant? This doesn't seem like you. Well, alright, the problem is me. The video of our battle got uploaded online, Lance admitted. Hey. Johan stood up from his chair. The body cam wasn't turned off. The video was automatically streamed to the control room. Normally, it wouldn't be an issue, since nobody watches those unless we're on a mission. But, as luck would have it, Agatha happened to see it. And she said, "This is what a battle should look like. This is tactical synergy at its finest." So, Johan silently picked up his phone and logged into the official league site. Sure enough, the video was on the homepage, recorded from Lance's perspective. The title read, "Dirty? Skillful? Don't use such words when talking about tactics." It had already accumulated over 100,000 views and was rising by the second. There were plenty of comments below. "Burning Leaf, tried it myself. Yep, it's dirty air, I mean strong. Maybe I just wasn't skilled enough, or my opponent was too strong, but I lost. Still, it gave me new insights into battle strategies. Mask Edmund, is this an evolution of the toxic stall strategy? Factory Head, rental battle? Such coordination with borrowed Pokémon is rare." And many, many more. Johan rubbed his forehead. He could already feel the ripples this video would create. His research paper's popularity seemed to be picking up traction again. More importantly, his online consultation room had received a sudden surge of new patients. He had been so preoccupied with helping the Alolan Vulpix all day that he hadn't paid attention to his phone. "I'm really sorry, Johan," Lance said. "I only found out today. But Agatha said all revenue from the video would go to you, and she's willing to send you a rare item or a move learning machine as compensation." Lance continued, "Of course, if you think this has negatively impacted you, I can contact them to take the video down right away." Ahem. Johan cleared his throat as he glanced at the new balance in his bank account. "You know, Lance, this video is more impactful on you," Johan pointed out. After all, this practically meant he was gaining fame at the expense of the renowned dragon tamer. Wins and losses are part of life. This battle taught me a lot. Everything else is secondary, Lance replied, laughing. Johan was slightly taken aback by his easygoing attitude. "Besides, my face isn't even in the video." Johan blinked, dumbfounded. Since the camera was mounted on Lance's shoulder, it was true that his face wasn't in the footage. Of course, anyone determined enough could figure it out, but Lance's words seemed meant to ease Johan's concerns. "It's a joke. Anyway, what do you want to do?" "It's your call," Lance said. After mulling it over for a moment, Johan sighed. "Leave it," he said. The battle had been for treating Aerodactyl, and there was no need to keep it under wraps. Besides, several of the gardeners and staff at the Stone Estate had witnessed the match anyway. And as far as gaining fame went, Johan figured it was inevitable. Why else would he have published that research paper? Plus, with so many people seeking his consultation, he'd be able to help more people and Pokémon. It might even bring in a bit of extra income. And it would give him more material for his research. He glanced over at Gastly and Vulpix, who were now playing together. With an extra Pokémon to care for, his expenses were only going to increase. After hanging up the call, Johan turned his attention to the messages in his consultation inbox. Most of the simpler queries were answered quickly. A few more complex ones remained. For example, "Psychic Girl, why won't my Kadabra evolve?" Chapter 57, The Psychic Girl, Sabrina. In the game, evolving Kadabra into Alakazam is similar to evolving Haunter into Gengar, as both require a trait evolution. Back before the introduction of the link cable item, evolving Pokémon like Haunter into its final form was a hurdle single-player fans struggled to overcome. However, the situation is slightly different in the Pokémon world. That's because trading essentially replicates the special magnetic fields found in the wild, which are necessary to stimulate certain Pokémon to complete their evolution. This explains why wild Alakazam, Gengar, and Golem are seen in the wild. To be honest, questions like these shouldn't be directed at someone like Johan, a Pokémon psychologist. Although not widely known, this is general knowledge. Still, after some thought, Johan decided to respond. "Grain in the field, you could try using the link cable item or attempt trade evolution." The response came faster than expected. "Psychic Girl, if that worked, why would I be asking you?" Johan. To be honest, this was the first time he had encountered someone with such a short temper. "Birds of every feather, hey." Johan patted his cheeks to snap himself out of his keyboard warrior mindset. He had a hunch that the person on the other end had quite a bad temper. If he butted heads with her, Things could easily escalate into a doctor-patient dispute. However, her words did make him think more deeply. Typically, Pokémon like Kadabra or Haunter evolve immediately through the use of a link cable or trait evolution methods. But from what she was saying, it seemed like she had already tried those methods without success. Since this world's reality can't follow game mechanics to the letter. Grain in the field, can you describe Kadabra's current state or tell me what it usually does? Psychic girl, what else can it do? Eye roll emoji, it just meditates, spaces out, and meditates again. Grain in the field, what about its eating and sleeping habits? Psychic girl? Do psychic Pokémon need to sleep? Do you even know what you're talking about? Johan. Taking a deep breath, Johan forced a smile. Grain in the field, well, I think you should try asking Kadabra what it wants. Even though it's a psychic type, it's not a machine. It has its own thoughts, routines, and preferences. It can't just be stuck meditating all the time. Grain in the field, try adding some color to its life. He wanted to add more, but noticed that the user had gone offline. Caca. Gastly seemed to notice Johan's mood, floating over curiously. It's nothing, Johan replied, waving it off with a smile. Caca. Gastly grinned and floated away to find Alolan Vulpix to play with. So, it's that whole psychic superiority complex thing, huh? Johan thought darkly. Maybe Mewtwo should give them all a reality check. Dangerous thoughts flickered in his eyes as he headed for the bathroom. After splashing his face with cold water, Johan stared at his reflection in the mirror. My emotions are all over the place. It seems that taking in Vulpix has put an invisible strain on me. This kind of mental state wasn't acceptable for a Pokémon psychologist and trainer. Not only could it impact himself, but it could also affect his Pokémon. Luckily, he realized it in time. Kanto Region Saffron City. As the most prosperous city in Kanto, Saffron is home to the Pokémon world's corporate giant, Silphco, as well as two powerful gyms. Deep within the Psychic-type gym lies a room cluttered with a multitude of plus-highs, some shaped like people and others resembling various Pokémon. Seated among these plus-highs is a girl in her late teens, wearing a form-fitting red outfit and long, straight hair. She is Sabrina, the Psychic-type gym leader. Standing before her is her Kadabra. Kadabra, do you need sleep? Sabrina asked flatly, pressing a hand to her forehead. Before Kadabra could answer, Sabrina's eyes began to glow with an eerie blue light. In sync, Kadabra's eyes reflected the same blue glow. With a slight shake of Sabrina's head, Kadabra awkwardly mirrored her movement. Seeing this, Sabrina smiled softly and murmured. See? Psychic Pokémon don't need to sleep. When the blue light in Sabrina's eyes faded, Kadabra returned to normal. A flicker of resistance crossed its eyes but quickly vanished. Still. Sabrina tilted her head slightly, as if reconsidering. It couldn't hurt to try, right? Kadabra blinked, a hint of surprise showing in its gaze as it glanced at Sabrina. Adjusting his mindset, Johan exited the bathroom and spotted Gastly and Alolan Vulpix seemingly getting along, laughing together. Yet, the more he listened, the more something felt off. He saw Gastly lead Alolan Vulpix to a large mirror. Caca. Let me tell you something. In our family, the most important skill is hypnosis. Oh. Vulpix tilted its head, not fully understanding, but nodded earnestly. Pleased, Gastly nodded back. Caca. Next is transformation. Hey? Johan, pouring himself a glass of water, listened curiously. Gastly's first lesson seemed reasonable enough. As the Pokémon of a psychologist, mastering hypnosis wasn't a bad idea. Alolan Vulpix had already learned hypnosis, and judging by the strength of its psychic, it seemed to have considerable psychic abilities to build on. But what was this about transformation? Johan watched as Gastly's black fog began to shift and change, its appearance morphing. Caca. Now I'm Gastly Bell. Oh. Alolan Vulpix's eyes sparkled with admiration. Gastly smirked, the black fog shifting again under Vulpix's expectant gaze. Caca. Now I'm Ghostina. Pfft. Johan nearly spat out his water. Oh. Vulpix gazed in wonder, its expression more admiring than ever. Gastly is amazing. To be fair, ever since Gastly learned Substitute, its shape-shifting abilities had indeed improved. Caca. Gastly couldn't stop grinning. It decided to keep pushing its elder sibling advantage. Caw. And after that, the most important thing, is scaring people, attacking from behind. Johan quickly put down his glass and picked up the soft and squishy Alolan Vulpix. It's time for bed. If he let Gastly keep teaching, he feared the young Vulpix might pick up some very questionable habits. Oh. Being suddenly scooped up, Alolan Vulpix blushed slightly, letting out a low whimper before burying its head into Johan's chest. Johan couldn't resist reaching out and running his fingers through the fluffy fur on its head, a contented smile spreading across his face. The stress he'd been feeling slowly melted away. Turns out, nothing relieves stress better than petting a cat, or rather, an Alolan Vulpix. So soft and cool to the touch. This is the good stuff. Oh. Vulpix purred softly, making a sound similar to a cat's purr. Oh. Caw. Seeing Alolan Vulpix being whisked away mid-lesson, Gastly was stunned. It hurriedly floated after them. Wait. I haven't finished teaching yet. Whether Vulpix wants to grow stronger, train, or battle, that's up to her, Johan's voice called back. Gastly nodded thoughtfully. That makes sense. Then it paused. Wait a minute, didn't I already teach that lesson? Gastly, turn off the lights. Click. Relieved that Johan hadn't caught on, Gastly happily floated towards the bed. Caw. I'm coming too. But after the lights went out, neither Johan nor Gastly noticed. In the large mirror they had been standing in front of earlier, a pair of crimson eyes blinked open, filled with confusion. Where's the login failure? Chapter 58, Taking That First Step. Caw. Gastly floated inside, casually opening the door for Johan, who had just reached the door with keys in hand. Johan felt a bit awkward. Johan's eyebrow twitched. Gastly, next time, wait until the doors open before going inside. Caw. Gastly turned around with a puzzled look. Why? Johan took a deep breath. Didn't you see the notice? There are warnings about burglars in the neighborhood. If people see you phasing through doors and unlocking them, we might get mistaken for thieves. Caw. Sigma, LLL. Seeing Gastly's shocked expression, Johan nodded in satisfaction and closed the door. Understand now. Caw. As Johan walked away, Gastly's eyes sparkled. It really was like that. Gastly hadn't noticed it before. But now, Oh. Hearing the commotion, Alolan Vulpix peeked cautiously around the doorframe. Upon seeing Johan and Gastly, her eyes lit up. She happily darted towards Johan. Oh. Wait, Vulpix. Thud. Before Johan could finish, Alolan Vulpix had pounced on him, licking his face affectionately. Wiping the frost off his face, Johan shot an annoyed glance at Gastly, who was laughing heartily nearby. He picked up the little one and set her down. Despite Alolan Vulpix's small size, with her fluffy fur making her appear not much bigger than a kitten, her strength was no joke. She had no problem knocking over an adult like Johan with ease. However, what surprised Johan the most was Vulpix's psychic power. It was completely unexpected for an Ice-type Pokémon. Like right now. As he tried to stand up, he felt himself being lifted by a gentle but firm psychic force. Is she really an Ice-type Pokémon? Or is this Seduc reincarnated? But you're recovering well, Johan noted. This was the third day since he had taken in Alolan Vulpix, and in the Pokédex information he could see, her status had improved from weak to good. There's a fireworks show tonight. Let's get ready, and we'll head out soon, Johan said, patting her soft fur. Oh. Hearing this, Alolan Vulpix hesitated and backed away a few steps, showing signs of anxiety and fear in her eyes. This was her current state. Besides being unaware of her own strength and possibly having a hidden violent streak, she was also incredibly shy and lacked confidence. Don't worry, we'll go together, Johan reassured her gently. Oh. With Johan's calming words, the little one eventually agreed and turned to start packing up with Gastly. Johan hadn't pried too deeply into Vulpix's past. For one, the pain of revisiting those memories might be too much. It had taken a lot for her to start opening up, and there was no need to risk reopening old wounds. Additionally, Johan had been in touch with Officer Jenny at the Rustboro Police Department to inquire about any illegal trades involving Alolan Pokémon. If results came from there, Vulpix wouldn't have to recall her own trauma. Still, he had managed to learn from indirect questioning that Vulpix had indeed been abandoned. However, she had never been officially captured. It seemed like whoever had taken her in had intended to keep her as a pet. In Johan's eyes, Vulpix's past was important, but if he had to choose, her future mattered more. If she remained stuck in the past, she'd never take that first step forward. She needed to take that first step. Half an hour later. The streets of Rustboro were bustling, with Alolan Vulpix perched on Johan's head, gripping his hair tightly. Vulpix, if you keep holding on like this, I'm going to end up bald. Oh. Realizing her mistake, Vulpix quickly loosened her grip and blew on Johan's scalp as if to soothe it. Crr crack. A thin layer of frost formed. Johan. He wondered if, aside from chesto berries and pecha berries, he should start carrying some aspear berries. Aspear berry, cures freezing or frostbite. Caw. In contrast to Vulpix, Gastly was much more carefree. Especially since it had somehow dug out a big red bow from home and tied it around its head. Gastly proudly called it a Vulpix matching style. If Johan hadn't stopped him, Gastly would have already been showing it off to strangers, asking if they liked his new look. One was a social butterfly, the other was socially anxious. Quite the pair. Uncle, that Vulpix is so cute. Why is it white? Asked a little girl, around 8 or 9 years old, holding a Jigglypuff plushie. Her eyes sparkled with curiosity. Uncle? Oh. Alolan Vulpix trembled and dug her claws into Johan's hair again, burying her head. Hiss. Johan took a sharp breath, forcing a smile. See, call me big brother. Okay, uncle. Is that really a Vulpix? The little girl tilted her head cutely. Just then, Gastly appeared out of nowhere and made a goofy face, sticking out its tongue. Caw. For a moment, the little girl froze, her eyes filling with tears. Oh no. Johan quickly grabbed Gastly and ran, spotting the girl's parents nearby. After a short jog, they arrived at the Riverside Park, the venue for the fireworks show. A cheerful crowd had already gathered, chatting and laughing. Johan found a quiet patch of grass off to the side to sit on, with Vulpix and Gastly beside him. Caw. Gastly pouted. Why'd you pull me away? Didn't you see that girl found me so cute, she wanted to cry? Johan's brow furrowed. Yeah, cute to death. Vulpix. Oh. Didn't you notice? Along the way, a lot of people were complimenting you, saying you were cute and beautiful. Oh. Really? If you just lift your head and stand tall, you'll find that you're much more popular than you think. Johan gently set Vulpix down on the grass. He touched his hair. Good grief! It was rock solid. But now wasn't the time to worry about that. He patted Vulpix's head softly and said. Take a step forward. Learn from Gastly. Turning to look, he saw Gastly had wandered over to a lovey-dovey couple, making exaggerated faces and showing off its big red bow. The startled couple took off running. Johan. Don't learn from Gastly. Just be yourself. Take a step forward, and maybe you'll see a whole new view. Oh. Encouraged by Johan's words, Vulpix steeled herself and closed her eyes tightly. Plip. She took a few hesitant steps forward. Boom. Suddenly, a dazzling firework lit up the night sky. The night was illuminated, as if scattered with stars. Startled, Vulpix instinctively opened her eyes. And saw the brilliant display of fireworks. The colors painted the sky, reflecting on her pure white fur and lighting up her crystal-clear eyes. Oh. So beautiful. Johan gently picked her up, with Gastly floating back beside him. The three of them sat on the grass, watching the bright flowers in the sky bloom and unconsciously smiling. Make a wish on the fireworks. It's supposed to be really lucky, Johan said. Caw. Oh. Really? Gastly and Vulpix exchanged a look. Caw. Gastly cackled. My wish? To help Johan and little Vulpix conquer champions and dominate elites. Oh. Vulpix blinked softly, smiling to herself. Gastly says Johan's destined to become an amazing trainer. I want to keep up. They both turned to look at Johan. Well, me? The world's so big I just want to take you both to see it. Johan laughed. Boom. A golden Pikachu-shaped firework exploded in the sky. Chapter 59, the invitation. Night had fallen deeply. After the fireworks show, Johan carried a sleeping Alolan Vulpix, accompanied by Gastly, as they headed home. Along the way, his phone suddenly buzzed. He pulled it out and saw. Psychic girl, you've got some skills. Grain in the field? Psychic girl, Kadabra didn't evolve, but after a nap, its psychic power grew significantly. Girl, did you sleep for 3 days? How long has it been since you last slept? This exchange confirmed Johan's suspicion that Psychic Girl was most likely a training fanatic. Her Pokémon probably barely had any time to rest. Psychic Girl, got any other suggestions? If Kadabra evolves or its psychic powers improve further, we're going to challenge it. Challenge it? Another Pokémon? This confirmed she was either a training or battle maniac. And trainers like this often lacked essential emotional bonds or connections with their Pokémon. This could explain why her Kadabra hadn't evolved despite meeting all the conditions. It likely had something to do with Psychic Girl herself. Grain in the field, maybe you two should try doing something else? Like watching a movie together, going on a nature walk, or cooking a meal together. Psychic Girl? What nonsense is this? Grain in the field, just try it. And listen to what Kadabra has to say. Johan had realized something. With people who are arrogant and ill-tempered, you don't need to be overly polite. Otherwise, they'll end up walking all over you. But Johan soon thought about his own Alolan Vulpix. Her psychic powers were quite strong, but she had poor control over them. Grain in the field, by the way, you seem really skilled at training psychic-type Pokémon. Do you have any methods to help them improve their psychic control? Psychic Girl, what? You can't even control basic psychic abilities? Mocking.gif. Johan ignored her condescending remarks. Grain in the field, you're not saying you don't have any, right? Psychic Girl, don't be ridiculous. Just wait. After a while, as Johan neared home, his phone buzzed again. She had sent a file. Training notes for psychic Pokémon. Psychic Girl, old man's notes. Took forever to find them. After sending this, her profile went offline. But Johan's eyes lit up. She actually had something. Although Alolan Vulpix was an ice-type Pokémon, approaching her training from the perspective of psychic power was not a bad idea. After his experience with Psychic Girl, Johan made a decision. He needed to set a friend request approval requirement applications only, no automatic ads. It wasn't about his rising popularity going to his head, it was more about the odd and random questions some people sent that left him bewildered. For example, someone once asked him, who's stronger, Magikarp or Feebas? And another asked, hey, do you get pregnant from kissing? Gardevoir blushing.gif. Humans really can't or, at least, shouldn't think this way. Such cases were just the tip of the iceberg. If he didn't set a filter, he'd be dealing with mental gymnastics every single day. At the very least, questions should be relevant to Pokémon. Looking up at the bright moon, Johan shook his hands to relax. Tired. Carrying Alolan Vulpix was no easy task either. Caw. Gastly floated over with a cheeky grin. Need me to take over? Johan squinted at him suspiciously. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed again. Eevee eats cabbage, time for meditation. Johan sighed heavily. No rest for the weary. Grain in the field, give me a moment, I'll be right there. The next morning, Johan woke up feeling remarkably refreshed despite the icy and tingling sensations. After a quick wash and a rushed breakfast, he headed to the academy. But today, he brought Alolan Vulpix along. Keeping her locked inside all the time wouldn't do her any good. And last night, she had shown great progress. She had bravely taken a step forward. As the coffee machine loudly brewed his cup, Johan prepared himself a fresh coffee. Vulpix. Hearing Johan call, the somewhat nervous and lost-looking Alolan Vulpix turned towards him. She saw Johan smiling at her while holding a cup of coffee and crouching down. Gastly's expression turned alarmed. Caw. Don't drink it. But Johan simply chuckled, blow on it. Oh. Alolan Vulpix wasn't sure what was going on, but she obediently blew on the cup. In an instant, the steaming hot espresso turned into a chilled iced coffee. Johan took a big gulp, smacking his lips in satisfaction, and patted Vulpix's head in praise. Well done, Vulpix. Oh. Vulpix bashfully turned her head away. It's really nothing. But the way her 6 fluffy tails swayed in excitement gave away her true feelings. Caw. Gastly, who was floating mid-air, froze. Wait, hold up. Aren't you gonna let Vulpix have a sip? Gastly, I have a morning meeting today. Look after Vulpix and make sure she doesn't wander off. After finishing his iced coffee in one go, Johan gave his instructions. Caw. Gastly nodded solemnly. Mission accepted. Bang. As soon as Johan left, Gastly grinned mischievously and turned to Alil and Vulpix. Oh. Seeing Gastly's expression, Vulpix's body tensed slightly, with faint psychic ripples emanating. Caw. Gastly quickly patted his face and dialed back his grin, clearing his throat. Caw. As I mentioned before, in the Johan household, hypnosis is the most important skill. Now, let me teach you the hypnosis techniques Johan once taught me. Hearing this, Alil and Vulpix's eyes sparkled with excitement, and she nodded eagerly. After the morning meeting, Dove, the first-year battle class advisor who had become acquainted with Johan during their previous field trip, approached him. Mr. Dove, this isn't appropriate. Of course it is, Professor Johan. The well-built Dove replied confidently. Your battle video with Lance went viral online, and even the director praised it during the meeting. Dove, with his well-organized thoughts, was highly respected as the main advisor for the Academy's most prominent first-year battle class. The kids in the first-year class idolize your strategies. If you give them a tactics lesson, they'd be overjoyed. But I'm just a Pokémon psychology instructor, Johan replied helplessly. Thanks, but no thanks. Don't worry, you won't be teaching alone. I've invited an old friend of mine to help. Even if you just make an appearance, it'll be more than enough. Dove laughed heartily, clapping Johan on the shoulder before leaving without giving him a chance to refuse. An old friend? Who is it? Johan asked, curious. Royal Masked Man. Dove's voice echoed down the hallway. Hey? Johan blinked in surprise. Royal Masked Man? Professor Kukui. Feeling a mix of confusion and anticipation, Johan returned to his consultation room. As soon as he opened the door, he shivered violently. Inside the room, a thin layer of snow had formed, turning it into a winter wonderland. Alil and Vulpix stood dazed in the middle of the room, while Gastly awkwardly turned his head, forcing a grin. Caw. It's not my fault, I swear. Chapter 60, Teaching and Solving Mysteries. You too. Johan pinched the bridge of his nose, taking a deep breath. It was evident what had caused the state of the consultation room. Alil and Vulpix's ability, Snow Warning. Snow Warning, when a Pokémon with this ability enters the field, the weather will change to snow, lasting for a set duration. This ability, along with Drought, Drizzle, and Sandstream, is known as one of the 4 major weather abilities. Experienced trainers often build their entire teams around such abilities, forming strategies like Hail teams, Sun teams, Rain teams, and Sandstorm teams. For now, Johan wasn't aiming to form such a team. He had only 2 Pokémon and was finding it challenging enough to care for them, let alone create an entire team strategy. However, Alil and Vulpix's ability gave him a possible direction to explore. Although Johan had been aware of Vulpix's ability, since he had captured her, she hadn't exhibited any characteristics of Snow Warning. Oh. Alil and Vulpix tensed up, lowering her head as if realizing she had done something wrong. You two, wanna have a snowball fight? Johan's voice cut through the tension. Caw. Oh. Smack. Before Gastly could react, a snowball splattered against its face, bursting into a flurry of snowflakes. The culprit was, of course, Johan, who crouched down, rolling a second snowball. Caw. Gastly, now aware of what was happening, let out a sinister laugh and began manipulating the accumulated snow with its black mist. Vulpix, quickly, hit it. Johan urged. Smack. Just as he was speaking, Johan himself got nailed with a snowball square on the head, turning half his hair white. Oh. Alil and Vulpix stood there, stunned, watching Johan and Gastly locked in a playful snowball fight. Her nose twitched slightly, and her eyes filled with tears. In the past, her uncontrollable snowstorms and her inability to manage her abilities had led her to be deemed an ill omen. That's why she always tried to suppress herself so much so that even she forgot what she was capable of. But Johan and Gastly didn't reject or hate her. They accepted her as she was. Oh oh oh. With a deep breath, Alolan Vulpix focused her powers, quickly gathering a snowball. In an instant, it had grown to the size of a millstone. Caw. Sigma, LLL. Seeing the massive snowball, Gastly yelped in shock. Is she cheating? Johan's eyebrow twitched. He turned his head and closed his eyes. Gastly, tonight Vulpix will let you have 2 sips. Boom. Caw. 2 hours later. Johan, having shed his jacket and rolled up his sleeves, wiped the sweat from his forehead. He had finally managed to clean up the snow that had piled up in the consultation room. Gastly lay sprawled on a single cedar couch, pretending to be weak, while Alolan Vulpix lay beside it with an apologetic expression. She gently fanned Gastly with her 6 fluffy tails like a large fan. Gastly, meanwhile, looked to be in heaven. Caw. Johan chose not to call Gastly out on its act. After all, it had indeed been hit directly by Alolan Vulpix's giant spiral snowball. Alright, get ready. We're heading out to help with a tactical class. Caw. Gastly perked up. Helping in class? Johan nodded. If it were just about assisting Dove with a tactical class, Johan would have refused. After all, if he were to teach, well, his strategies could be a bit too intense for the students' innocent minds. But since Dove had also invited the Royal Masked Man, Johan decided it was worth attending. As a professional wrestler, the Royal Masked Man was quite popular online. However, that identity wasn't the key point. The critical point was the person behind the mask, Professor Kukui, the future leading researcher of Pokémon moves in the Alola region. Of course, Professor Kukui might not yet have earned his doctorate at this stage, he was likely still studying and gaining experience. This brought Johan's thoughts to the Alola region. Alola hadn't established a Pokémon League yet, and one of Kukui's greatest dreams was to establish the Alola League. To achieve this, the young Kukui was traveling and studying different regions to learn from their league systems. In the future, he would not only establish the Alola Pokémon League but also the Alola Pokémon School. He would serve as both the league champion and a teacher at the school while continuing his research on Pokémon moves, a remarkably capable individual. He would be one of the rare few to achieve a doctorate and become a top-tier trainer. The previous person to do so was Professor Oak. Moreover, despite all his success, Kukui would eventually marry a very beautiful wife, Professor Burnett. Not even Professor Oak could top that. For Johan, though, the most important part was that Kukui was from Alola. And Alolan Vulpix was also from Alola. The largest lecture hall at Kanaz Academy, which also served as the Academy's auditorium. Students began arriving in groups, chatting happily and accompanied by their Pokémon. Backstage in the preparation room, or more accurately, the dressing room behind the stage. Mr. Dove, didn't you say this was for the first-year battle class? Johan rubbed his forehead. Such a large lecture hall couldn't possibly be for just one class. Ha, it's all good, Dove laughed heartily. He leaned in closer to Johan and whispered, don't worry, the Academy approved this event, and Professor Johan, your appearance fee is the same as the Royal Masked Man's. He gave Johan a knowing look and a wink. Johan straightened his expression. As an instructor, the appearance fee isn't important. I simply believe that a teacher should focus on guidance, education, and problem solving. Guidance, education, and problem solving, well said. At that moment, a man with a well-built but not overly muscular frame walked in, wearing an exaggerated mask. It was the Royal Masked Man, Kukui. Alola, you two. Seeing Dove and Johan looking over, Kukui grinned and posed with his hands on his hips. It was very reminiscent of a certain teacher's iconic stance in the Pokémon world. After exchanging greetings, Johan learned from Dove that he used to be a wrestler himself. He had lost a match to Kukui and challenged him to a Pokémon battle to prove himself. He lost again, but the two had become friends. Caw. Gastly mimicked Kukui's pose, grinning widely. Dove and Kukui both paused, surprised. Johan turned away. Can't bear to watch. Ha, looks like you two will get along just fine, Dove chuckled, pushing over a cart filled with Pokeballs. You guys can chat for now. You might need to demonstrate some tactics later, and these are for teaching purposes. As an instructor in the battle class, Dove couldn't rely solely on his own Pokémon to demonstrate every tactic and concept. Therefore, teaching Pokémon were essential. These Pokémon typically resided in the Academy's dedicated care facilities. While they wouldn't be suitable for actual battles, they were perfect for demonstrations. After Dove left, Kukui, ever friendly, turned to Johan. I watched your battle with the Dragon Master Lance, Professor Johan. Your strategy of protect toxic substitute was impressively executed, with additional layers of tactical thinking. I saw your comment too, Johan thought silently, smiling as he replied, I often watch your matches as the Royal Masked Man, too. Oh, really? Which one? Kukui's eyes lit up with curiosity. Johan. Hey, is this an Alolan Vulpix? Kukui asked, his attention shifting to the little Pokémon nestled in Johan's arms. Oh. Hearing Kukui's voice, Alolan Vulpix burrowed further into Johan's embrace. It is, Johan confirmed, gently stroking the little one's fur to reassure her. Mr. Royal Masked Man, you're from Alola, right? I'd like to ask you a few things after class if that's all right. No problem. Kukui thumped his chest enthusiastically, his eyes burning with determination. But Professor Johan, don't hold back later, I want to see your tactics in action. Johan, who was browsing through the teaching Pokémon list, paused. A slow smile spread across his face. Is that so? His hand stopped on a Pokeball containing a Lapras. Gastly, it looks like you've got a new strategy to try.
Thanks for listening.